Hey, what's up? Welcome to the Black Eye Biz Social Club. Another week, another day. What's up, Fisto? How you doing?
Hey man, how you doing?
So we're off to kind of a slow start today. I didn't get around to preparing much, and I put it out the link a little bit too late. And I do have to admit why I did that. I was just playing video games. I'm just playing this game. I'm playing this game called Hunt 1986 or something like that, and you're basically a cowboy and you shoot people in the face with your friends.
Perfect.
Uh,
Nice.
what was that? Rainbow Pride. Yeah, there we go. LGBT, Mike. LGBT for life. No. Yeah. So I've been kind of cracking out on that one. But yeah, and for you listeners at home, this might be a short episode because there's like a hurricane or a storm coming down on Fisto. I gotta pray for him because we don't want him to get deluged.
It seems like Oh, you know what? I was just about to say. It seems like it's past, and then a big old roll of thunder just came rolling across the roof. Ooh, that's a long one.
Yeah.
All right, just ended. Yeah, no, yeah, they got some real ones out here tonight, so that's fun. But yeah, if I vanish, I just the gods have
It is
destroyed
what it is. It is what it
the
is.
internet.
Right? So,
Yeah, don't worry about it. It's fine.
So just wanted to say welcome all our Substack people. Usually people start trickling in around in the first hour. Welcome to our YouTube people listening live on YouTube. We have not forgotten you. If you comment on YouTube, on the live chat on YouTube, it connects with our StreamYard chat, so we get to see it all. Only problem is Substack hasn't integrated itself in the StreamYard yet, which hopefully they will do soon. But otherwise, we should be good to go. If you comment on YouTube, it actually will post across the screen because we turned that setting on. So that should be kind of cool.
So YouTube, you can say hi to Substack and call them all fake, gay, retarded.
Oh, hell yeah, Jason. I mean, no, that is wrong.
It's amazing.
All right. So let's see. Before we start, some minutes from last meeting, important topics that need to be addressed. What is the current ban block list right now?
Oh yes, I just pressed the button. I'm gonna press it again just in case I got one in under the bell. I also have a funny thing to say regarding the blacklist this week, but I am at 3,309.
Oh.
So we're just trucking right along, baby.
Yeah, we're gonna keep it up. And for you guys, when we talked about the Halloween episode last week, and when we talked about Halloween stuff, and I told you about parties, I did post a picture of myself as Captain Kirk. So that kind of, I figured I'd throw that out there. So if you have Substack, you can see me dressed as Captain Kirk. It was called wearing a Halloween costume back in the day. Now it's called cosplaying, which is just, whatever. But, it is what it is. So let's see. Let's jump into some topics, right?
Yeah,
let's see if I can remember. So have you finished a book yet? Have you finished the book Against the Machine?
No, not yet. This weekend, I should say, I was very, very, very tired. I think I came down with a bug, but I was basically super freaking lazy. I am all the way through. I was reading it today, actually. I got a couple of chapters in today. I'm in chapter 18 right now, where he's talking about the effect of the machine on the nation after just being done with discussing the effect of the machine on the family. So,
okay, you know what?
Very interesting.
Because here's the thing. Because I have not even got a chance to start yet because I've been really, really busy playing Hunt. I am determined to read it this week from beginning to end and jot down some commentary, and we will do commentary on it 100% next week, right? So
next week I'm gonna have plenty of time, so we could do it Tuesday, and we could really, really dig into it, or we could even do a special episode if you want.
Let's just do a regular one. That way, so if you guys have 1 week to read it along with us, if you have the chance, it's called Against the Machine. I posted it a million times, so there's nothing.
Yeah, I'll post it in chat right now. But yeah, it's really great. It's kind of making me hate everything. I'm excited to see what his solutions are, or what his advice is. I have a sense of what it probably is basing on what I know about King's North and what I read about the book, what attracted me to it to begin with. Uh, but yeah, the elimination of home, the elimination of the family, the elimination of everything that gets in the way of our fake and gay transhumanist machine capitalist overlords. Yeah, it's making a lot of sense. I actually had a thought. I kind of had a daydream on my way home from work today, and for those of you that aren't longtime listeners of the podcast, uh, longtime listeners of the podcast, I before I was a teacher, I worked for a internet startup, and ever since I left that startup, I feel as if my life has been going back in time almost. Um, and I wonder if my experience at the tech startup was like as close as I got to just being fully subliminated by the machine. And now I'm moving backward to, I live in a small town. I have a wife. I have a home. I have a, slightly old school job. And I don't know. I feel like I'm moving further and further and further out of it every day.
That's fucking awesome, dude.
Yeah, it's kind of creepy. It's kind of weird, going back to church, being openly Christian again, discovering that I was never really not Christian. I was just gay and retarded. Stuff like that. So I don't know.
That sounds that's like I've been, if you noticed, I haven't really been online as much as I used to.
Yeah.
So yesterday, actually, I do have an announcement. I was a guest on a podcast. It wasn't a live stream, so it's going to be out soon. I'm going to announce it probably when the host announces it. And I was like the first time I like turned on my computer and like since last time we talked, I was on Matthew Cini's podcast, and it's really funny because he basically wanted to talk about a bunch of different stuff, and we did, and he had like topics that he's like, oh, we should talk about this stuff, and then we ended up talking about like Star Trek for an hour and a half, which is pretty funny, right? And it's like it just proves the fact that like I thought that maybe with a somebody hosting me and kind of directing the conversation, it would basically, keep me on track and focused. But then I realized, no, it's impossible. I will go on insane tangents about Star Trek for like 2 hours, and yeah, it was really good. We talked a lot about stuff, and we talked a lot about like the whole paganism thing. And he mentioned my 2 essays on paganism, and we kind of discussed that. We discussed science fiction and some, how we look at science fiction from the old Asimov era of the atheist kind of pocket protector scientism, and then basically like your materialist to our going forward with science fiction. It's going to have to for it to be relevant, it's going to have to bring in a lot of the mythical into it, right? Which is interesting because I was laying down last night trying to fall asleep, and I was thinking of Cyberpunk 2077, like what I always think about every day, and the high level of mysticism and sacredness in that game itself. Even though it is such a hard science fiction game, you have tons of spiritual concepts, mystical concepts. You have tarot cards, the idea of the self and the human spirit transitioning into the machine, a kind of bizarro, kind of weird afterlife, and it asks all kinds of questions about what it is to be immortal. So I think that future science fiction is going to have to deal with that level, and that goes really into the play of how do we square the idea of the spiritual and the idea of the material machine, and can we have a spiritual machine? Can we be part of the machine and still retain the spiritual cohesion? So there's a lot of interesting questions that kind of got posed on that podcast last night. And one of them, and I don't want to go too much into details because I think the conversation we had yesterday was really good. So I don't want to like steal its thunder because we're doing this live and he hasn't put it out yet. But we talked about how lefty progressive materialists are incapable of creating interesting characters in a way in fiction because they they see it reflects in them so much, right? Like it's how they killed the Borg in Star Trek. The Borg were the great villains in the early Next Generation, and then they completely destroyed the concept by adding the Borg Queen and all that kind of silly crap. Because I think that the Borg is the end stage of materialism, if you really want to be honest, right? If you
Right.
remove the spiritual, if you remove truth from materialism, all you have is pure utilitarianism, and the Borg is the perfect society. The Borg is end stage utopia, right? Because they are peaceful to each other, right? There's no suffering, there's no pain, there's nothing, right? Firefly, or in Serenity, in the movie that ended this show, kind of did the same thing, right? What is the end stage of neoliberalism? Well, Miranda, right? A freaking a planet where everybody's basically dead because they've been pacified to death, right?
I thought you were jumping over to Firefly there.
Right. Because that's where it leads to, right?
Yeah.
Which is interesting because that was such a based observation in Firefly and Serenity. And what's his name is such an annoying libcuck, right?
Yeah.
What's
100% true. Joss Whedon.
Joss Whedon, right?
Yeah.
Well, now that we got a little bit more people, I think there is one topic that I wanted to talk about, right? And it's something that I've been thinking in the post Charlie Kirk stuff, and post moving forward, towards kind of like what next, right? Like what is the next step going forward with these projects and this kind of stuff. And one of the things, and this unfortunately came up in real life for me, I'm not going to go into details, right? But I wanted to talk. Okay, so let me preface this by some stuff, right? And in the chat, you guys can mention it. Actually, before we go, I say hello to everybody on Caravaggio. And no, I have not seen the Land and Dugan debate with Aaron McIntyre. I might need to go pick it. I mean, I'm sure it's on YouTube or something, and I'll catch it. Land is interesting. I have read some of Nick. He's talked about Nick Land and Alexander Dugin. Alexander Dugin is a Russian philosopher. He's one of the third positionists. He actually liked our podcast a while back, which is kind of cool.
That's when we had Constantine on, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's when we had Konstantin Hofmeister on. He's a very interesting guy. He's a Russian. He's denigrated by being a Putinist, but I mean, he's a Russian. What do you expect, right? He's a Russian guy, right. So he's on the Russian side of things, right?
Imagine that.
And then Nick Land, if you guys are not familiar with, is also a philosopher. He is a philosopher from England who he's an accelerationist, and he's part of the very early Dark Enlightenment stuff. He came up with a lot of that early stuff. He was in the same kind of like think tank as what's his name, the guy that shot himself, the lefty dude that shot himself. Interesting guy, really out there. I think he moved to Thailand and like is doing a lot of drugs or something. Or at least last time I checked up on him. I used to like he used to post a lot on Twitter back in the day. I don't know if he does anymore. I used to follow him. I think he followed me back one time, and I mean I didn't really interact with him, but he posts like really out there cool stuff. There's a collection. Mark Fisher, that is right. I think he comes from the same think tank as Mark Fisher back in England. I forgot what it was called, and then he ended up leaving that. And that's when they were experimenting with a lot of like drugs, like a lot of speed and stuff like that. And interesting stuff. The kind of the main book that people like assigned, his main kind of thing is like Fang Numina. He mixes a lot of like Lovecraftian Cthulhu kind of stuff into his work, and it's very dark. It's very out there. He's actually developed a lot. He used to be more out there, and I think he's become a little bit like a more palatable, but it's difficult stuff. It's not easy philosophy. Okay, it's not something you pick up and just read left to right. It's Nick Land's stuff is deep. It's heavy, and it's level 4. If I want to, it's not a book. None of his work and his essays are something you just give out to anybody. It's like it's a higher level thing. Okay. And that's why
graduate
he comes
work, maybe graduate
yeah,
work.
Yeah, it's hardcore. It's not very shit posty. It's difficult and it's very interesting, but it's difficult, right?
Yeah.
So that would be interesting. Land and Dugan. I mean, Land is a Westerner, Dugan's an Easterner. Fascinating stuff. I think I'll give it a listen to, but I have a feeling that that's a debate that I'm going to have to sit down and listen to in depth because it's going to be the ones where I have to pause and probably review things and kind of catch up with both their work, which I am not. I'm a journeyman when it comes to that stuff, to be honest. I have read Mark Fisher though. Mark Fisher is, if you're not familiar, was another British philosopher. He was a lefty one. He wrote his big thing was like Welcome to the Exiting the Vampire Castle, and he wrote a lot of. They all wrote a lot. He wrote a lot of essays on his old blog, and then he ended up shooting himself, unfortunately. But he was a liberal, but like a far left liberal against neoliberalism. Basically, he spent most of his critiques were not against like the right; they were actually against liberalism, neoliberalism, and like the kind of corporate kind of culture. He writes fascinating stuff actually, and I do really recommend it. A lot of the ideas that he kind of came up with kind of rolled into the contemporary new right, to be honest. I think a lot of people on the right are very familiar with Mark Fisher, and that's why even though he's of the left, he's still somebody that is, I think, respected by people on the right for various reasons. He did write a really interesting book on. I'm gonna pull it up right now. He wrote an interesting book on horror fiction and horror in movies and stuff. Let me find it. It's like all his books are like big essays, basically. I'm like not prepared. So he used to run this blog called K Punk, right? And his like main book is like K Punk, which is a collection of all his essays. It's worth reading. I read it through. It's long, right? There's a lot of like years of like blog posts and essays, right? And then he wrote Capitalist Realism, and the one I really like is called The Weird and Eerie, and it's really about horror and horror fiction, horror television, and it's about weird and eerie horror, right? And it's kind of it's right up my alley because that's the kind of horror and science fiction I'm into, like weird and eerie, right? And we can talk about that some other time, like indefinitely, because those are interesting topics. But the gist of it is the idea that we are horrified by things that are weird or eerie, things that are like out of place, things that like a playground that's a night that's empty, that's creepy to us, right? Because it's eerie, right? Or something that is weird is things that are different and should not be, right? So yeah, there's a lot of really good stuff in his work. He explores those kind of ideas, and there's really good stuff in his more political, cultural work that outside of like fiction that he did, right? And he's definitely worth reading. Nick Land is worth reading, but like I said, I think you would have to. It's not philosophy 101 or intro to philosophy level. It's a little bit higher level. It's not something you pick up and just enjoy, or it's not a pleasant read. It's not written for the layman. It's very schizophrenic and insane, but still very good. So it's worth watching. Okay, so now that's out of the way. What I do wanted to talk about, and what I mean is this is not a lecture in any way, shape, or form, right? Like none of the stuff we ever do on here is a lecture, right? This is a conversational podcast. We are having a conversation. And what I mean by that, and the reason I preface it, preempt any criticism is that oftentimes, like I'm going to today, I'm working through these ideas myself, right? So these are things that I've been wrestling with, driving to work and back and in my own life. And when I put out my thoughts, they're not my definitive thoughts, all right? It's not like when I write it down on a Substack post or in a book. These are more like, hey, what do you guys think about this idea? But this, right? It's and I'm trying to make it in a very Socratic kind of way between me and you, Fisto,
Yeah.
And which for you longtime listeners that have been on here for a while, for a fact that I've changed my opinion on a lot of different things, right? Cool. We're pushing about 30 live people right now. Welcome all you guys and trickling in. So what I want to talk about, and I want your opinion on this, is the idea of tolerance, right? And we kind of like inadvertently touched on the idea of tolerance last week. But
Mhm.
what I really mean is how much can we tolerate in other people, right? Like how many other ideas that we find absolutely harmful should we tolerate? And what I'm specifically referring to is in a group of friends, let's say, um, yeah, I mean, that's an idea, Jason. But let's say in a group of friends or in a family group, or right, how do we tolerate people that have very different ideas, right? And ideas that are harmful to the greater group, for example, if they were to be implemented. And what I mean by that is, let's say, okay, I'm going to quote, not quote, but paraphrase, what's his name? Not Nick Land, uh, the other guy, the other Dark Enlightenment guy, Curtis
Fisher.
Yarvin.
Oh,
Curtis
Yarvin.
Yarvin,
Okay.
right?
All right. Okay.
And Curtis Yarvin says that, Cthulhu always swims left, right? And what he means by that is that the state of everything always goes towards chaos, right? So a good example is it's another concept of Chesterton's fence. And if you guys are not familiar with Chesterton's fence, I want to kind of explain that. Is that if you build a fence in the middle of a field somewhere, like the field in our picture right now, right? Which is a symbolist painting by what's his name? Mikhail something. I forgot what his name is. I had it down. But if you have a fence in the middle of a field somewhere, over time, that fence or that stone wall is going to fall apart, right? In order to keep that fence going, you need to paint it. You need to change timbers. You need to, because of everything in the universe trends towards, chaos, trends towards decay, trends towards falling apart. So in order to maintain something, you have to constantly build it and protect it and refresh it, right? You can apply the same kind of rule towards institutions. So in an institution, like let's say a church or a school or a church school or a group of people, will eventually trend towards chaos, right? You see that in the military. The military, which is like, you take a unit or two units that are very efficient, very professional, blah, blah, blah. Eventually, things start to kind of fall apart. The key members end up leaving or retiring, or new people come in with different ideas. And eventually, you lose that discipline, you lose that experience. You see this in sports teams and everything, right? So if we keep that rule in mind that eventually everything turns into, chaos or the left, right? Then the question is, how much tolerance can we have towards elements that might be leading us in that direction in our friend groups or in our churches or in our institutions, right? And think about like the Roman Catholic Church and its institutions. And for all you RC guys, I don't, I apologize if I am miscategorizing anything. This is really me just using it as an example because it's more universal. You had a time when the Catholic Church was dominant in creating universities. And you had like universities like Notre Dame, right, in the United States. And it was for Catholics, for Roman Catholics that were Catholic, right? And then eventually they're like, well, let's open it up to non-Catholics, right? And then let's open it up to women. And then let's open it up to people that, aren't believers in God anymore. And then let's open it up to people that are okay with LGBT, And now, how is a university like Notre Dame any different than like Arizona State, right? Like it's lost
Okay.
one of its key purposes. So the
Right.
question is, how much tolerance should we have in our groups? The left is very good at being intolerant. All right. You don't have a lot of different thinkers in lefty friend groups or lefty institutions. Right. Like go be a right winger or say right wing things in groups of lefties. It's just not acceptable. I mean, would you say that that's correct?
Yeah, 100%. What I thought of is bringing back to what you said a minute ago. How tolerant can you be of the Borg?
Right.
Right?
Right.
They're not
How?
tolerant at all. It's their way or the highway, literally.
Right.
So in return, can you tolerate the Borg? Well, no, of course not. You can't. It's this line no further, and it's kill or be killed. So
Right. Right. So in the current position where we're at, right? The right has always been very tolerant because there's a tendency of righty groups to accept everybody. You know, as long as you profess, like, I mean, you see this is like kind of a weird, like, gross thing that the right wing does. It's where you'll have like some psycho, like, lunatic, like, like whatever superstar decides to have like one right wing point, like, what's that rapper? Fuck, what's his name? Um, the crazy ass bastard,
Kanye, that guy.
Kanye West, right?
Oh no shit!
And
Did I really get that right? I hate myself now.
yeah, Kanye West, right? And he has some righty opinions or whatever, and then bam, he's like, he's a beast, he's our man, let's bring him into it, And I'm like, well, he no,
Well,
no,
look, the thing is, I would suggest that perhaps there really isn't all that much of a right wing at all, because we are swimming in the detritus of our decisions, the consequences of our decisions. And Fisto's playlist. No, it's all Rush, baby.
Ew.
We're swimming in the consequences of our decisions, and it's the post enlightenment, it's the post liberal world, it's the modern world. So is anybody really on the right? Because what are they conserving? I mean, if we're going to just jump at Kanye, it's just another example of how celebrities are the real priesthood. Celebrities are the real leaders. They are the real nobility in this
Right.
slop of a machine anti-culture world that we are finding
Right.
ourselves in. So I mean, I don't know. I would question the whole notion of a right, quote unquote. Certainly it is compared to the left, right? But in any kind of absolute sense, I don't know.
Right. Well, I think, I mean, I'm thinking even more on like a local level. Like, for example, like, a church, right? Now we have seen the utter absolute destruction of the Protestant, evangelical churches by adopting, kind of liberal ideas, and these ideas they're not like, it's not like these guys are taking these churches over, right? They're brought
Yeah.
in slowly, one person at a time, right? So how do you say, like, what is like what is the proper way? Like, how do you balance? Okay, so we are called to be tolerant, right? We live in without a doubt, we live in a multi-religious, multi-philosophical, multicultural world. We cannot deny that, right? And we cannot go on fundamentalist crusades and kill each other. I'm not going to cross the street and beat up my Protestant neighbor, or like kick my Jewish neighbor's door down, or any of that kind of stuff, right? Because one, that would be just mentally ill and spiritually wrong. But at the same time, we have to take a fundamentalist point, and not a fundamentalist, but a righteous point, where we have to say, well, we believe in the truth. This is our truth. It is the truth. It is not a relative truth. It is not that you might, your truth is your truth and my truth is my truth. No,
Well,
this is the truth and you are wrong, but I'm not going to kill you for it. I think that's like a key that we have to keep in mind, right? I'm not going to hurt you for it.
Isn't just asking the question marking us as enemies of the regime and enemies of the culture?
Right, right.
Just asking the question and just supposing that this is even a topic worthy of discussion. That right there is already going to cause enough problems, right?
Right. I mean, the fact that we're even discussing it, right? But how do you deal with people, right, that are otherwise well-meaning, nice people that are in your friend group or in your, church group, whatever groups, right? And are deluded or have like harmful beliefs. Right? How do you deal with them in a tolerant way, right? And I'm not talking about like, okay, listen, I'm not talking about like the blue haired, side head shaven, like bull ring in the nose, like lunatic, right? Um, I'm not talking about that, right? I'm talking about your, normal dude that might have some like liberal sensibilities and or something like that, or your normal, basic boomer kind of mindset, right? How do you deal with that, and how do you get those people to, the point is like there has to be a level where we have to say, you know what, maybe we don't want you around, right? Like we are tolerant of your beliefs, but maybe your beliefs are not welcomed in this group, right? Like we have to be able to find the level of tolerance and the difference between tolerance and acceptance, the difference between tolerance and like empowerment of these ideas, right? Because we we are very okay, and the reason this comes up, right, is because we are at a precarious level, right? Post Charlie Kirk, post this kind of realignment of the culture that we've seen in the last month, really, is you're going to have a lot of people that are, for all purposes, leftists, right? Or at least are indoctrinated with very, very leftist ideas because, well, that's the water we swim in, right?
Right.
You can't escape it, right? And they're going to be coming into your church and into your school or into all these situations, and they're going to have one based idea. That's what brought them to, right? But now they still have all that baggage, and a lot of these people, they'll hold on to that baggage for a long time. And if you tolerate that baggage, you're going to destroy your institution, right? Like and that's where the danger is. The danger is it's like the danger is that due to our tolerance, we're going to let these people in, and then they're going to bring their noise. And it's kind of the Gamergate thing, to be honest, right? It's the same problem, right? Where you brought in the other people, like the bullies and stuff, because you wanted to be nice to them, and then they turned on you, right? So we are like kind of like we need to not make the mistakes of the past, if that makes sense.
I think
And
so. So yeah, I think it does make sense. The two thoughts, the two thoughts that enter my mind, are we have to ask this question too, at I think an even deeper level, where is there any potential for intentional infiltration, where under the cover of, hey, oh, this horrible thing happened, and people are like, oh my gosh, and you know, maybe they don't intend to be infiltrating institutions with bad ideas, but because they don't authentically repent, it might as well be intentional. You know what I
right,
mean?
right,
And I think that is going to be any tolerance is going to be hand in hand with actual repentance and an actual changing of mind. I I think for me anyway, what kept coming up is you're going to have to look at the actions and not what they think and not what they say, because there's always kind of a lag. People will say certain things and they'll act a certain way, or they'll say certain things and they'll believe a certain thing and they'll write certain things, but then when you look at their actions, it doesn't match. And
right,
I think that's really where it's going to be, um, because often you'll see people who say the dumbest shit, but in reality, it's irrelevant. It just doesn't matter because they behave as they are supposed to behave anyway. You know what I mean?
right, right,
Because talk basically talk is cheap, man. So perhaps in a lot of ways that's where you got to look, and you should also probably clarify. I presume you're talking about actual physical encounters and actual physical spaces like
right,
church and
right,
work
right.
and
That's
town.
exactly what I'm talking about. It.
Yeah, on the internet it's all fucking bullshit anyway. So who cares? And if you're dumb enough to use your real name on the internet, I don't know what the fuck to tell you. It's whatever at that point, I guess. And I think really, yeah, we need to focus on the not internet because that's the actual real stuff. So yeah, it just kind of has to. It just kind of has to do with you just got to look at what they do, not what they say, right?
Right. Right. I mean, Jason says this is what's great about orthodoxy. It is hard for an infiltrator to fake it long enough to go through a full catechism period. And
Yeah,
you're
true.
right. You are right, but also wrong, right? Because even in our church, I'm not talking about like my church, but the Orthodox church, right? There are tons of older people from like the boomer era that have really out there ridiculous like liberal beliefs, and I've seen plenty of
Yeah.
boomer Orthodox people that share stuff like David Barnhart stuff. If you guys are familiar with David Barnhart, right? And those people can be very poisonous towards an organization, right? If you guys aren't familiar with David Barnhart, he's this Methodist preacher, and he's a super lefty. I mean, he's pro women being ordained. He is pro abortion. Just search this guy and
All the bullshit.
time yourself like looking through his like social media and stuff and see it like how long it takes you until you gag, because this guy's just you're like, okay, dude, like you are so wrong about everything. Like why even bother, right? And you have to remember that because we are entering in a kind of a religious revival era of our culture, you're going to have a level of infiltration that's going to go on, right? And it's going to be something that we need to be very careful, right? Because for every 10 based, ortho bros or trad caths that are joining the church, you have, inside the churches themselves, there's those old people, right? There's those 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 classical liberal types that are easily swayed. The parents in Dostoevsky's Demons, right? They're the dangerous ones, right? They're the ones that have controlling power over like finances and direction of the church, because nobody's going to listen to the 20-year-old based bro, but they are going to listen to the 60-year-old old man that goes home and gets on Facebook and is sharing like Kamala Harris memes and that kind of stuff, right? And for the most part in the world, politically speaking, I'm not very interested in people's politics, right? I
Yeah.
will be friends with you. I don't care if you, I mean, like if you like, for example, if you're like a Kamala Harris voter, I'm gonna be like, okay, that's some of us are born with lower IQs than others. It's okay, like it's not your fault. You're retarded, but I still love you, right? But then there's some kind of like there's other people that do have exceptionally harmful kind of ideas, and I have some friends, that have really really kind of gross like beliefs, like I have a friend that I've loved, and I think she's an amazing person, but she got a coat hanger tattoo on her arm, and it's
Ugh.
it's hard for me to think about that, because it's like there's a difference between like being, I don't know, it's do you see what I mean, right? And
I do.
how do you deal with that, without destroying like your friend group and your acquaintance group, but at the same time, right, like you have to be able to go, no, that's actually gross. Now
Yeah.
a part of me, like, and this is why I said this is a difficult problem, because it is something that I think is touches upon a lot of difficulties, because you do want to be friends with people, and you do want to be tolerant and loving and accepting, and we're supposed to love our enemies and supposed to love our neighbors, right? And that's not a bad thing, that's a great thing. The
Mhm.
pagan bro retards that say that loving your enemy is bad, or it makes Christians cucks or whatever, they're the ones that are cucks, right? Because they're the ones that will sit there and seethe and loathe forever, while forgiveness is really, it's not for the other people, it's for yourself, and having the ability to control your emotions and not be filled with hatred and anger is not a bad
Yeah.
thing. It's actually the
Yeah.
strong position.
Forgiving and loving your enemies does not preclude justice when required.
Right,
I mean,
right,
that's just thinking like an absolute child.
right. But the question is, how are you, like, how do you deal with your aunt who like is a hardcore abortion supporter or something like that, and or your
You
friend.
know, In my case, it's a little different because I live in a town where I don't have any immediate family here. So how do I deal with my relatives that are shitty? Well, I'm not online, so I actually don't have to deal with them at all, and that is what it is. But the problem I'm running into, so like I think about my church community, and I have boomers in that community where, it's they do the boomer thing, and it makes the skin on the back of my neck crawl. Um, but I also realize that part of that is my problem, and part of it also is my own self not doing what I can actually do to fix it. So like one of the problems with our church community is that everybody that attends it drives in from elsewhere. We have a couple people that drive like 2 hours to go to church there, which I get that. I mean, it's an important thing to go where God is, right? Even if it's a couple hours away. But I only ever see him on Sunday, and that sucks. I kind of hate that a little bit. But I just did something, shut the fuck up and fix it, Fisto. There's one of the guys lives in my town, so I just texted him and said, "Hey, we got to hang out sometime." I mean, I need to be the one to fix it. I have to be the one to change it, and I have to be the one to identify what I don't like and be the guy that takes the steps to fix it. Because some of these things, this is why I'm liking Kings North's book so much, and I think it relates directly to what you're discussing. The problems that we are dealing with are centuries in the making, so these are not going to get fixed in our lifetime or probably even our grandchildren's lifetime. But the acts of resistance, the acts of rebuilding a even semi-competent society, they're worth doing even if we fail, because there's obviously there's a bigger thing at play here. But yeah, I mean, for other people, I don't know, man. It's the folks are going to have to figure it out on their own. But I think it is a question worth asking. You have to draw the line somewhere. Thinking of the coat hanger lady. Where's that tattoo on her? Do you know where it actually is on her body?
It's like an arm or something.
Okay, so here's what I would watch. Here's what I would look for. If somebody like that were to start coming to church or start to come in, wanting to be in my social circle, I would obviously find that tattoo absolutely fucking disgusting. However, that said, if I notice them wearing clothes that covered up that item, perhaps after a discussion or perhaps after, some kind of conversation, those are the things you got to look for. The little subtle changes in someone's behavior. You have to really, you have to pay attention to be present to find out if these people ever even are changing. And typically, I think most people will find out very quickly whether it's worth engaging with them or not.
Right.
I think about like in my classroom, like I think about certain students who, pick up what I'm trying to do immediately and run with it. And I know those kids are going to be good all year, but I've also learned that I need to be incredibly patient. Some kids, they won't open up for a few weeks, a few months, maybe not even until the end of the year. Last year I learned a very important lesson where I had one kid who did not open up until literally the second to last day of class. I ran into him today and he told me that he's passing all of his classes now. I mean, the kid is like completely turned it around, right?
That's
but
amazing.
I gotta, yeah. Oh, little guy made my month. But you gotta be patient though, and it's a balance. Because then at the same token too, these are high school kids. They're making that transition from 8th grade to 9th grade, right? They're going from retarded to slightly less retarded, and so it should be expected. With grown adults and like some of the boomers I got to deal with at church, like I mean, I don't know. I don't even know if there is anything to be done there, because to a certain extent, that's not my problem. That's the priest's problem, right? And maybe I
right. I mean, that's true. Here, let me close my door. My dog opened my door, and I need to close it real fast. Give me a second. Keep talking.
Puppers. But to illustrate there, priests are priests are the shepherds of the flock. Perhaps I will find myself in an opportunity where I can help in the flock. But right now, I mean, I'm just a catechist, so I'm not going to worry myself. I'm not going to worry myself with things that just are really not my responsibility. Is in this case, aren't we essentially discussing the parable of the talents?
Yeah, I guess you're right.
I've been giving half a talent at this point. I don't have fucking anything yet. So, I'm focused on what I've been given. and I'm not focused on what I have not been given. And if I'm given that later on down the line, then fine. But I'm not putting the cart before the horse. That's not
Right.
my job.
It's just, you know, like I said, this is something I've been thinking about because, you know, and it's not the younger people that I have a hard time with, to be honest. It's the older people, you know, and sometimes sometimes like the young people are easy because they, in a way, are I can gatekeep. You know, I can approach them and properly like at least give them the right perspective. At least they expose them to the right perspective. It's actually older people I have a hard time with because a lot of times, to be honest, while I do respect the old, you know, there's a lot of great old people, you know, that are, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah, I
there
got them too.
is there is a poisonous generation, right? There's a poisonous streak, and they are they're, they're difficult, you know, and there's a lot of ideas that should have been put aside, and there's a lot of ideas that uh, are very poisonous and brought us to where we are today, and we need to, you know, kind of like talk out. So the question is, how do we talk about like these type of things that are like are troublesome or difficult, but at the same time we have to be polite. And I don't know, you know, I mean, like you know, what if like for example we had like you know somebody in our group here in our chat or in our that had like crazy ideas and stuff, you know, and they were we
Well,
wanted to be polite to them. Well, we talk. I mean, it'd be easy for us because we just tell them to shut up, retard. You know, like it's
well,
the
on the
proper
internet,
way.
that's appropriate. You know, it's low stakes. It doesn't matter that much. You know, we could press the delete button tomorrow, and that's the end of it.
Right.
The people that live in our homes, though, the people that live in our communities, though, the people that we run into in our day-to-day lives are an entirely different matter. And I suspect part of it is knowing when to speak. We should not presume that we need to speak at all. I'm thinking about a conversation I had with a student. She's a senior this year, and is one of the, she's one of the few students that talked to me from like my very first year. I was terribly, terribly, terribly rough my first year, right? I mean, it is what it is. I didn't know what I was doing, but for whatever reason, her and I have connected, and she's going to graduate this year. And she made a joke the other day. She was hanging out in my classroom before she had to go to work, and she said, "Hey, over the years I've talked to you, I still haven't figured out how your mind works or how your brain works." And I laughed at her and I said, "Good, because that's intentional. That's how I really am." And her and I have had some deep conversations where it's gotten into the nature of the universe and the truth. And we've talked a little bit about the gospel and going to church and stuff like that. And some of it you just have to wait around until people realize, oh shit, you're kind of weird. What's up with you? You don't want to presume that you need to speak. You have to let the example kind of annoy the hell out of them so much that they just can't help but then be like, okay, what the hell's up with you, dude? Why are you like this?
Right.
And it's like, thank you for finally asking. Now I
Well,
it's because I think Christ actually did die and raise from the grave, and I think all of that's true, and it has an impact on things. So I mean,
absolutely.
this is I don't know. This is how you got to be, I think, to an extent. Now, I don't know if that's true for everybody, but
Right.
perhaps there's some wisdom in there.
Now, for us parents, for example, right?
Ooh, boy, yeah.
There are things that we have to, in this world we have to navigate, right? Which is, for example, what if you come across people that are otherwise smart, wise people, but
Yeah.
do hold some, iffy beliefs, right? And how do you allow your children to interact with that? You're going to have to preempt them. You have to make sure that people are not exposed to that kind of stuff, right? Like, I don't know. It's such a difficult thing, man. It's such a difficult thing to like navigate today because it's like I feel like everything around every corner is there's like a landmine, and it makes me feel very like defensive about everything, and I almost want to like just go escape into my own kind of like weird Amish world or something like that, in the middle of a forest somewhere and just live in a cave so I'm not exposed to people. I'm, I'm weary, Fisto. Guys, I'm weary this week. Okay. I'm weary of
Yeah,
nonsense. I'm,
yeah, that's fair.
uh, yeah. And like when Melody says it, she struggles with the parenting friends. Yeah. That's a hard thing, right? Now, you don't have a kid right now, Fisto. Hopefully,
No,
God willing, will have one in the future.
sooner rather than later. Yeah, sooner rather
But
than
it's
later.
a,
I
it's
hope
a
so.
it's a difficult thing because every time your kid makes a friend, and my daughter's finally entering that phase where, like, before she's 7 now, but before um it used to be like, her friends are like whatever, and they like watch Bluey together or something. But now that she's older, she's making friends. She's at the point where she's starting to be influenced by her friends, right? Like,
Yeah,
um, she's like basically like exited the sphere of now she's in school and she's hanging out at school and she's doing all kinds of school stuff. And um, so her friends influence her. She's finally like up until recently, everything she was into or everything she did is stuff that like we discovered together, me and her, or my wife and her, or all of us together. And
yeah,
that's kind of like what her world was. But now that she's a second grader and she's like, she's out there and she's like finding things and like, having preferences that are her own, very separate from me and my wife. Like, that means that she's being influenced by other friends, right? We're all influenced by our friends. We're influenced by our
yeah,
peer groups, right? So when she goes over to somebody's house and we go hang out, that means that I have to become acquaintances with their parents,
yeah.
right?
You got to get to
Just
know 'em.
not my favorite thing, to be honest, because I'm like I've become a reclusive hermit recently.
Right.
But you have to go out, you have to kind of go out there and you gotta probe people's parents and be like, oh, hey, are you into
Look, you're
you know
making me
what,
feel like
what
I'm not. Yeah, no. I'll say it like this. Uh, Probably the one thing I'm not looking forward to is being a parent is having my child come home and say, "Dad, no one hangs out with me because you keep calling them retarded.
Yeah. Well, and that
You
is
keep
that
calling
is
everybody a
true.
fucking retard, Dad. I'm not popular at school because you keep calling everyone stupid." And I'm gonna be like,
Yeah.
"Well, if they weren't stupid, I wouldn't have to call them that."
Yeah, and
You
then and then your
know?
kid hates you, dyes their hair blue, gets a septum piercing, and
Yeah,
is off.
the the trick is what I've been telling some of my kids in class this week. Maybe it's going to be, listen, guys, I'm going to kick your ass this week because I'm hoping next week when you come back, when you come back for second quarter, you're gonna be able to up your game here a little bit. And they kind of look at me, they're like, all right, all right. I'm like, listen, I'm kicking your ass because I love you. Okay, all right, now get back
Right,
to fucking work. No, I'm kidding.
right,
I don't talk that much like that in class. But anyway,
and
you see what I'm saying? It's that balance of I'm
right,
whooping on
and
you because I care.
you gotta like you gotta find things. I mean, one
Yeah.
thing is like, you know, like what if your freaking kid's best friend's parents are like straight up like wasters or something like that? You know what I mean?
I mean,
Like
to a certain
how do
extent, you
you
just got to be like, look, they're a bunch of fucking worthless druggies. You're not hanging out with them. I'm sorry. Like, I love you, kid, but no,
right?
you're not going. Or
What
actually,
look at what
actually,
Brian said in the chat. Read what Brian said in the chat.
oh no, oh, that's the worst.
Right. Exactly.
Oof. I
What
mean,
if
but at that point, if it's something like that, I mean, maybe the thing to do is open your house to that friend and be like,
right.
look, you like, because, oh,
For the people that are not reading the
I'm
chat,
gonna start gagging. I'm gonna
our,
start
our friend
gagging.
Brian in the
He's,
chat says,
oh,
"Don't get me started about my kid's best friend's parents turned out to be swingers." Right? Yeah, I mean
ugh, Seattle.
that's a thing. There's a lot of people. There's a lot of people where I live that are super swinger types. And there's a lot of people that have like really crazy beliefs. And you're just like almost it's like if your friends like if your parents' friends were like something simple like go to your Jewish friend's house. That's easy. You're like, just go over there, whatever. Just don't get circumcised, right?
Yeah, remember back in the day though, where like adults were able to regulate enough that your kid could be friends with somebody whose parents are swingers, but you would never fucking find out.
Right, right.
And they
But
just
now,
that
now
was
it has to
off
be like
fucking limits.
it has to
Now
be
it's got to be out
everywhere.
there. Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
geez, like if folks got up to that shit, like don't fucking say anything. Like it's just you would never know.
Like probably back in the 50s, it was like, oh no,
Yeah,
Stacy's
make
mom.
discipline great again.
Stacy's
Make
mom is
make
Stacy's mom is divorced. Ooh,
yeah, right.
you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah,
Like that,
exactly.
something
Yeah,
like that. You're like, oh my god, Now it's like, oh, Stacy's mom has a sex dungeon, like in her
right.
basement, and you're like,
Stacy's
fuck.
mom has Stacy's mom has got it going on
Yeah, Stacy's mom
OnlyFans.
has an
Fuck.
OnlyFans or something like
Yeah,
that. How
right.
did how do you deal with that, man? Not
Got it
like,
going
oh,
on
like,
OnlyFans.
it's like I'm dreading those
Yeah,
days, man. Like every time I'm like, ah, like, because you know what? Like I was introduced, I was very much influenced by my friends' parents, and
yeah,
luckily I had good friends and who had overall good parents, and then my
yeah.
parents instilled a pretty solid-ish kind of moral background in me, or at least uh, what my mom instilled in me. It wasn't
Maybe
so much morality; it was a healthy dose of classism, right? That's what she put into me, right? Where she's like,
you're better
don't
than these scrubs,
like those
Alex. You're
people
better
are
than these
poor, or like
scrubs.
but
Yeah, you're better
like
than
even though we were poor, it was more like,
that.
those people are trashy. You don't even like the white trash people's house, or like or
Yeah,
just because like they're like, or that kind of stuff, right? But it's so like I was like, oh, I'm not going to do like low classy things, because it
yeah.
just that's what you kind of built into me, right? But at the
That's
same
funny.
time, it's like, that's not particularly right, but maybe it protected me from going to my friend's parents' meth house or something like that, or
Yeah,
whatever,
yeah.
like,
I think we have to just realize that to a certain extent, one way or another, you're going to be raising your kids in Night City, and
right,
you have to think about how do you raise kids in a place like that, because people will still do it. I mean, people are going to have to figure this out. People are going to have to think about it. People are going to have to talk about it. And as long as the digital realm snakes its snakes its tentacles like so much Japanese anime porn into our households, we're gonna have to cope with it. We're just gonna have to learn how to cope with it.
right, right.
And the kids are gonna have to be prepared too, because the other side of it, man, is you can't just shelter them all from this, because the moment they get outside the shelter, they're gonna get one shotted, and they're gonna be taking it up the butt from a furry. So
Right. Right.
you gotta
Because it's like, oh, well, so and so's parents are really cool and stuff, and they do the really cool things. And then, um, it just, I don't know. I don't know. It's just
some of it's
difficult.
gonna have to be some of it's gonna have to be just honest with them. Like, they're like, oh, parents do all these kinds of cool things and they do this and that and this. Like, son, they're gonna rape you. That's why they're doing
Right.
those things. All
Yeah.
right. So
It's or
look,
or their like viewpoints are wrong, and
yeah.
it's
It's
like,
because they're planning to fatten you up and eat you. All right.
right.
They're cannibals, son. That's why you can't go over there. You can't hang out
Well,
with the cannibals.
okay, that's the difficult thing. The most insidious thing about a lot of these things, right, is that they're not immediately harmful. And for example, like, you can be just normal people swingers, right, with an open relationship. Eventually, it's going to blow up in your face, and it's going to turn into just fucking misery, because it's like, I've never met anybody or known anybody or read anything ever about any of those relationships that works out. They're all
No,
explode into you know, full blown degeneracy and disaster for everybody,
full blown retard town every
But
time.
for, it could last for a year, two, five, even a decade, And how do when your kid's time frame is like, brain span of like a year max, right? That's
Yeah,
how
like
they
years in
think,
eternity.
right? Now you're basically going, oh, well, look, they're normal, they're fine. There's no, because they don't see the long term effects of those kind of relationships. They don't see those kind of effects, on that kind of lifestyle. So
Yeah, they can't even conceive of it.
I think the key is maybe to communicate with your kids and make sure that they're properly like educated on this kind of stuff. But then at the same time is like, how do you deal with a friend? Let's say you had a friend that was like, into like swinging, and it's like,
Yeah.
do I really want you around in my house? Like, is that something I want to like, like
Yeah.
I understand like forgiveness, and I understand the idea of, yeah, but there comes a point where do you cut off people like that? That are otherwise nice, great people. How do you distance? I think you have to somewhat distance yourself from that stuff, right? You're like,
Well,
well,
you have to be willing to say that certain things are red lines, and if whatever else is true, people who, for example, are straight up addicted to meth, they are not good and nice people. They just aren't. No matter how well they've got everything else figured out in the world, at the end of the day, you're a fucking crackhead. And that is just unforgivable. I mean, not unforgivable. That's not what I want to, that's not how I want to frame it. But as far as like being a friend, quote unquote, I mean, I don't know about you, man, but I'm not friends with drug addicts. I'm not friends with, degenerate sex addicts. I'm just not friends with those people. And am I acquainted with them? Sure. Do I know them in my life? Yeah, most certainly. But I'm not friends with them. I don't trust them with anything, and I certainly wouldn't trust
right,
them with anything like my kids. Now, maybe that's
yeah,
naive because I don't have children, and it is what it is. But I think it's probably going to have to spell. It's probably going to have to go a little bit into the differences between the rural life and the urban life. And it sounds like, from what I understand, you have a much more suburban life than I do, and I have a rural life. So our concerns are also going to be different in that realm. And then that's going to be different from an urban life, isn't it? I mean, an urban one's going to be way more difficult than anything you and
right.
I have to deal with.
I don't think you
You
have
know what I mean?
friends in the urban world. You just like everybody just kind of
No,
lives alone in their box.
yeah, you have clients in the
Right,
urban world. You know,
right.
what about in like suburban or versus rural? Because there is a culture of expectation here. Like there is a culture of you act a particular way. You know what I mean? And certain things, if you must, they're kept on the down low. Like ain't nobody, nobody knows anything about them.
Yeah.
So what do you think about that?
Well, I mean, yeah. Well, absolutely, right. Like, I think that, like, in a urban world, in a one of the big cities, I would say like Chicago, LA is like,
Yeah,
so where for you guys that have never lived in Los Angeles area, Los Angeles is a really weird place because it's not as urban as like Chicago is, for example. If you live in Chicago or New York, it's very urban to where you can walk around and, you know, go to the local corner store or bodega or whatever and, take the train and that kind of stuff. You can't do that in Los Angeles. Los Angeles is like one giant, massive suburb, and it's very deracinated and very separate. There's little tiny neighborhoods where you kind of can walk around. San Diego has that a little bit in like, North Park, University cities. But yeah, Los Angeles itself is just one giant like freeway connected suburb where there isn't like half the places even have sidewalks anywhere. Like if you're in Los Angeles, right? Like people drive to like the downtown of like some of the areas, and there's like restaurants and stuff, but you don't really like walk or you don't really connect with anybody. It's really a hellish landscape if you really want to be honest, right? It's very like it's built for cars, it's built for like separation, and it's not it's not very urban in what we think of as urban when people like talk about urban, because it's really just a giant city burb or suburb type of
yeah,
thing. But yeah, when you live in that kind of situation, you are much more able to become anonymous, right? And you're not so much dependent on your neighbors. You probably don't even know your neighbors, right? And you are much more dependent on like just friend groups from all over the place and like meeting spaces in the middle and that kind of stuff. And you can basically get away with being weird and shit, and your neighbors never noticing that you're weird and shit, if that makes sense,
yeah. No, it
Uh,
it makes sense.
right. Like
It's atomized. You're atomized.
right. If you're in a small town of like a few hundred people and you're running like the local brothel, everybody's gonna know, right? Like if you're running the one-eyed jacks, from freaking Twin Peaks, right? Like, so like it's very different in a small town, right? Like if you're living in Twin Peaks, it's very different than if you're living in Los Angeles. It's just a different world, right? So it's much harder to like hide, and so you have to kind of address differences right away. Now the
Yeah.
question is, at what point do we start addressing differences in polite and in the polite world, right? Like after the Charlie Kirk murder, we had all those nurses and all those kind of people, right? I can guarantee you that some of us had friends that posted the most heinous shit on the internet, right? um thank God I haven't seen any of my friends post any heinous stuff, right? Or
Yeah.
my acquaintances, but I'm sure a lot of us did have people. I know my wife did, right? So like how do we deal with that kind of stuff? Now, are we tolerant? Do we just like invite them over for Thanksgiving, or do we go, hey man, like what the fuck? Like like where guys in the right tend to be so tolerant, like, yeah, whatever. They'll invite the people that are, you know, guys in the right will invite people that like will go home and post about like, commie death squads murdering them, but at the same time we'll have no, those people will never invite the other people over, so it's really interesting that like we like approach it that way. Anyways, this is what's kind of on my mind. It's kind of boring, guys. I'm sorry. It's something I've been thinking about a lot today in the last couple of days, because I'm interacting a lot more with my group of parent friends and my group of church people and that kind of stuff. And this is a topic that is kind of lingering in the background. And
Yeah. Is it something that they want to talk about, or is it something that you've noticed things and you wish to bring it up with them?
well, so in my case, I've noticed some of the boomers at my church post absolutely ridiculous shit on the internet, right?
Right.
Like straight up like heretical stuff, right? Like and I'm
Right.
just like, how do you approach that, without like causing this huge fight? At the same time, it's like I'm terrified of any type of institution I'm in to turn into like the fake and gay left nonsense, right? Because that's how it
Right.
happens, dude. That's how it happens, right? Like you have some boomers tolerate that stuff, and the same boomers that were like super hardcore conservatives 20 years ago are now, Protestants with liberal like rainbow flags outside their church, right? And in a way that's how it happens, right? It's always through niceness, right? You're like, oh, my friend's brother is gay and he's really great. Okay, yeah, he is really great. So we're gonna invite him to like church or our group, and then he's really cool and everybody likes him. I mean, you don't want to be the dick and tell him, hey man, you're not allowed, you're not invited because you're gay. But then he brings his like super flaming boyfriend, and now you've got two. You know what I mean? And then eventually, like another friend comes out as gay, so now they're not going anywhere, and then bam, you have Rainbow Church.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Right?
Yeah. I
Like
mean,
it.
part of the advantage of going to an Orthodox church is straight up, yeah, it's an Orthodox church. That's not cool. Like that's not going to be. You're welcome to come, but it's not.
Well, you think that, but I mean, look at the Greeks, right? They
Yeah.
have
Okay.
a significant problem with talking about getting very friendly with LGBTs type ideas and that kind of stuff. And I have a hard time with that too. Like I'm being honest here, right? Because I have several gay friends, and I love my gay friends, right? And I absolutely think they're great people, and I don't, I their lifestyle is not something that I can condone, but at the same time, I still want to be their friends, and I still
Yeah.
respect them as people, and I still love them as humans. Like I love all people for the most part, or at least I try to love all people. Right? I'm very bad at that, guys. That's not even true, right? But
Yeah.
you know, like that's the difference. I have to find the difference between to tolerate, to love, and to tolerate, but not to confirm. That's like such a hard and difficult line. Like where do you say, okay, maybe no, not further than this, right? And is it a slippery slope, right? Is it like, you know what I mean, right? Like, and that's so
Mm.
fucking difficult, right? Because like I don't want to be a fundamentalist, like, no, you're, you know, banned type of thing, right?
Yeah.
So,
Well,
you know,
I suppose part of it. Yeah, I suppose part of it is making sure you're talking to the people who actually make decisions in whatever institution or whatever organization. Like your church, for example, you're pretty close with your priest, right?
right,
So, yeah, you better be having conversations with him
right.
because that that's the guy you need to talk to at the end of the day, right? He's got that authority, and is there anything that those folks can do to that authority?
Right. You know, I think
No.
I think I have like a fear. And I have a fear, and this is maybe it's an irrational fear, right? And I
Yeah.
mean, Jason McGinty, who is also an Orthodox Christian, can kind of attest. I am afraid I'm afraid of the Roman Catholics, right? There's I never want to be in a situation that most of my Roman Catholic friends are in now, right? Which
Yeah.
is that I'm in a church that I don't agree with, right? And I'm
Yeah.
not talking about like spiritually, right? Because I know Roman Catholics that all agree with their spiritual
Yeah.
beliefs, but I'm
Yeah.
talking is, you know, it has to be very difficult for the Roman Catholics to accept like the new current pope's statements, right? Especially the
Yeah.
ones he made recently, right? And how do you like how do you deal with that? You know, how do you
Well, you know, being baptized Roman Catholic and growing up in an Irish Catholic household, at least on at least on my mother's side, they were observing Irish Catholics. One of the most Catholic things you can do is disagree with the Pope. So
right,
I think a lot of them probably do just fine, because it's not the Pope that they're running into every day; it's their priest that they're running into every day. So part of it is a lot of this is downstream from, and a lot of this comes out of a deep, long history that I've alluded to on the podcast already several times tonight, where these are problems centuries in the making. You know, and are you and I responsible for the problems that are centuries in the making? No, fucking course not. So we just, you're gonna have to do the best with what you got, bro. And even if your fear comes to pass, well, trust that you will be able to figure it out anyway, right?
right, right,
So I don't know. That's probably the best that anybody can say, or best anybody can hope for. Because I know one of the problems that we need to be aware of is worrying too much about these problems and having them paralyze us.
no,
You know?
that's actually very wise, you know, like I actually like
Yeah,
yeah, like that you know you're and that's why I said like this is why this conversation is something that's been bugging me, you know, because
yeah,
I had a series. You know, I'll explain how I kind of came to it. Right,
yeah.
I saw the new.
Hold on. Before you say this, I want to offer one more thought just to kind of color the conversation. It strikes me that it's got to be either listen, Satan, get behind me or fucking make my day. All right, like none of this shit or get off the pot, buddy. If you're gonna fake and gay the church, then fucking do it. Just but and I'm kidding, of course, but it is kind of an attitude of just get behind me and do what we need to do. And you know, if you're gonna do it, make my fucking day. All right, let's go. Little dirty Harry kind of energy here. But
Right.
maybe that's just my deep American speaking out. But sorry, you were gonna say.
Well, so I don't know if you like follow X or all the different stuff, right? I
No.
don't. It's poisonous, right? And I occasionally
Yeah.
go to it because
Ugh.
I do have to, I do have to, do our stuff, right? Um, there's different statements that the Roman Catholic Pope recently made, and one of them, and I don't have the quote in front of me, right? So if I'm
Yeah.
wrong, uh, go ahead and misquote me. But I've noticed this. Okay, I've noticed that like there is a new kind of trend in the progressive liberal like left, right? Which is using Christianity to attack Christianity, right? It's
Yeah, that's the worst.
there's a new trend where like because I think that they've realized that there's kind of a religious awakening going on, right? In the last month specifically, you can see it, but it's been going on for a while. And because of that, they've reverted to their, for a while they kind of left religion alone and it wasn't as like a huge thing they came after. But now they've taken an interesting tact, which is not so much Fedora had atheism, right? But they're attacking religion from a religious standpoint. And the evil one is doing it in two ways, right? In the first way it's doing it is through like stuff like pagans and stuff, right? Like the pagans, they think they're based Chad rightists, but they're actually just leftist at heart, right? Their
Yeah.
entire institution belief system is very much of the left, and it's very much of the original left, which is uh, apple eating serpents, right? When it comes to it, because it really is about their own political ideas, right? But now you see this kind of like assault upon the right through this. You saw it with the kind of back and forth with JD Vance about like you see a lot in this whole ICE immigration thing going on, right? Which is like, well, why don't you love your neighbors, and and this kind of thing, right? And you had the Pope that he went on and said something along the lines of like he criticized, like he said, like he's against he basically he made an equivalence between abortion and immigration, right? Or
Yeah.
abortion, and he made an equivalence between abortion and capital punishment, right? And now I understand what he means by that to a certain degree, right? The killing is killing, right? That if it's the old, come on, it's the old liberal shit lip thing of like, well, you're pro life in one thing and then you're pro death in the other one, right? Like, so you like technically, it's trying to say that like, if you're against abortion, you should also be against capital punishment, right?
Yeah.
And it's such an idiotic shit lib argument. It's such a
Yeah, it's recognizing that they're arguing semantics and
right,
that they're arguing they're relying on machine-like technique to win the argument instead of saying anything that an actual person would say.
right,
So this is kind of where the power of shut up retard comes in.
right.
And
Well,
when it comes to Vance specifically, one of the things I like about him is that he is not afraid just to be like, look, I don't give a fucking shit. Shut the fuck up. Like
right,
it's just straight up like, listen, eat shit and die. He doesn't.
right,
It's the vice president. You don't have. He doesn't have to fucking listen to anybody. He's like, hey, I won the election. Deal with it.
right.
So
And hopefully he
to a
wins the
certain
next
extent,
one
there
too.
is some of that. What's that?
Right. And hopefully he wins the next one.
Man, I mean, we'll see. We'll see in 2026. I think a lot of people are getting super fucking tired of
Right.
leftist bullshit, and it's going to be incredibly difficult for them to put up any kind of cognizant thing that isn't just re-Trump. And in 2028, Vance is just going to have to go. Donald Trump can't run, guys. Relax. And then everybody's going to vote because who are they going to put? Gavin Newsom. Good
We'll
Lord, just
see.
throw up.
We'll
Just
see.
I mean, anyway, yeah, I don't necessarily want to veer into politics,
Right.
but it just strikes me that a lot of this stuff is, you know, just gotta leave to God what's God's, and
Right.
anything else is, we'll find out.
Right.
But anyway,
But when you argue something like that, right? When you argue that like, you're making this moral equivalence between abortion and between capital punishment, right? Well, first of all, right, killing is bad, right? Killing is an ultimate evil, right? All killing is bad, whether it's abortion or capital punishment or killing in
yeah,
war or accidental killing. They're all bad, right? Now, the act of murder is different than killing. Those are something that we need to kind of differentiate. But ultimately, all killing is bad, but justice is right, if that makes sense. You know what I mean?
yeah,
And when we execute somebody, right, we are ultimately, in a way, while the act itself is evil and wrong, right, we're not executing an innocent, right?
right,
When you're aborting an unborn child, an innocent that has not even taken a breath yet, it is a very, very big difference between executing a mass murderer or a
yeah,
psychotic killer, right?
of course,
And
yeah,
I don't think it takes a theological degree or a degree in
no,
philosophy
it doesn't.
or to differentiate between the two. And it is very out there to me that you can make that moral equivalence. Now, I came across this, and this is kind of what set me off, right? I came across this post that somebody that I don't know, somebody that I like posted, right? And I was
It's
like,
me, isn't it?
no, it's
Just
not
kidding.
you, right? It's a quote from the Christian left, right?
Uh-oh.
Right there. That's an oxymoron to begin
Yeah.
with. But
Yeah. Sorry.
anyways,
Does not exist.
I'm going to read you this because it's about abortion. It's I'll tell you what I think about it afterwards. All right. So the quote is,
Yeah.
"The unborn are a convenient group of people to advocate for. They never make demands of you. They are morally uncomplicated. Unlike the incarcerated, addicted, or the chronically poor, they don't resent your condensation or complain that you are not politically correct. Unlike widows, they do not ask you to question patriarchy. Unlike orphans, they do not need money, education, or childcare. Unlike aliens, they do not bring all that racial, cultural, and religious baggage that you dislike. They allow you to feel good about yourself without any work at creating or maintaining relationships. And when they are born, you can forget about them because they cease to be unborn. You can love the unborn and advocate for them without substantially challenging your own wealth, power, or privilege, without reimagining social structures, apologizing, or making reparations to anyone. They are, in short, the perfect people to love if you want to claim your love Jesus, but actually dislike people who breathe. Prisoners, immigrants, the sick, the poor, widows, orphans, all the groups that are specifically mentioned in the Bible, they all get thrown under the bus for the unborn." And this is from a Methodist pastor, David Barnhart, right?
No.
Now,
So,
ultimately,
somebody needs to just punch him in the face and be done with it. That
right.
shit is the dumbest fucking shit I've ever heard. No, it's just,
So, what
first
do you
off,
think about that?
you said privilege unironically. Shut the fuck up. Like,
Right.
that's it. Just no. There's nothing to say to that guy. And I mean, he's not saying anything different than what the whole host of these fools have been saying for the past 20 years, it seems like. And yeah, he's slapping at Christian things on there, and he's slapping at, look, anybody who believes that is Christianity, they were going to believe whatever that dude was going to say. He could say he's a Buddhist leftist, and they would like
Right.
gobble that shit up. Like, it just doesn't matter.
Right.
It's slop. It's just more slop getting, eagerly sucked down the gullet. Ugh, God.
I actually personally think that what that is just a rewarmed over intellectualized rephrasing of Judas's argument when Mary wanted to anoint Christ with the oils,
Yeah,
in that part in the Bible where he's like, well, what about the poor? I can't believe we're wasting all that expensive oil and we should be giving it to the poor and stuff, right? That's kind of what, in a way, that's the same argument, right? It's the same argument that he's making, but a lot more contemporary and complicated.
yeah,
But based down, it's the same argument, right? And what's interesting about this argument, right, is that on the surface level, you're like, okay, I kind of agree with it. There's a string of truth in it, right? There's some, you're right. There is, for example, in the hardcore pro-life groups, it can become it can become a political movement that overshadows what the whole point of everything is, right? To the point where, but ultimately, I'm going to cough. Ultimately, what we are talking about here is, the lives of unborn children, right? Like, we're talking about babies getting their heads crushed by forceps and their corpses put into plastic bags and dumped in dumpsters behind Planned Parenthood. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about a society that has killed, I don't know what the numbers are, but I know they're horrifying when you count all the abortions that have happened since abortion has been legal in the United
yeah.
States. You
Oh
know,
yeah.
a third of the, potentially a third of the population of, this country has been, murdered, basically, right? Terminated before they even got a chance to take their first breath. So we're not
Yeah.
talking about, feeding crackheads or the impoverished here, right? We are talking about a massive, massive Malachian scale murder,
Yeah.
a massive sacrifice to evil, right? So yes, I think it does take a little bit of precedence over Hernandez's family's well-being because they broke the law and came to this country. Okay, I'm sorry about that, bro. Right? At the same time, right? When you talk about immigration, and I'm an immigrant, guys, like as you can tell by my name is Alexander Constantine, and I was born in a different country, right? I I have like very mixed feelings about immigration, and I don't particularly love the way the whole ICE thing is going on because I find it a little bit vulgar. It kind of like it it rankles my sensibilities of propriety, to be honest, in the way the government is behaving somewhat about it. I just don't think it should be put down on like on in I don't think the government and the agents should be me magicking this kind of stuff, right? I find it kind of distasteful, to be honest, right? I think the government employees should have a level of propriety that is kind of lacking right now. I also think that a lot of it is just it's just smoke and mirrors, to be honest, right? I think that if the United States government or Americans as a whole were serious about immigration reform and immigration control, they would not be going after no-name families of like Paco Hernandez or whatever, right? Or whoever else they're deporting. They would be going after the contractors that employ like the thousands of Hispanic immigrants, right, or illegal immigrants, right? The restaurants, the hotel chains. That's who should be in jail. Okay, those are the people that are giving away the jobs, right? Those Hispanic illegal immigrants or whatever immigrants that are illegal in this country are not stealing the jobs. A job is not something you steal, right? A job is given to you, right? So the people that are guilty of it are the contractors, the people that hire them, the people that create an infrastructure that allows cheap labor to take advantage of it, right? So if you're really serious about immigration, okay, you wouldn't be cheering on some agents like deporting rando grandma or whatever, which they're not doing. They're deporting a bunch of criminals mostly, right? But that's not who you're cheering for. That's not who you should be cheering for. I will start cheering for ICE when they start deporting the construction contractors that hire thousands of illegal immigrants instead of American contractors, right? I would cheer for, I want to see a hotel guy, who hires thousands of, illegal immigrant staff, right? For their hotel and their golf courses and all this stuff. When those guys go to jail, that's when I'll be cheering. Okay. So yeah, it is a complex, nuanced issue, but they're not mutually exclusive, right? You can absolutely care about your borders and your walls and also care about your water supply, right? Like when you're managing a society, you have to be you have to attack all points, right? Because it doesn't matter if you're building great walls, right? If
Yeah.
inside your city somebody's building a tunnel that's unsecured.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's
I
where
do.
that's the problem with this false equivalency thing that I find, where it's like, I can care about both things. I can care about the plight of people in foreign countries, and I feel bad for a lot of people, right? There's a lot of people in foreign countries that are living much better than us, right? There's a lot of people in many, many, many foreign countries that live much better lives than I do, whether it's physically, spiritually, financially, or any of that stuff, right? But then there's a lot of people that are living in misery, and I know that God blessed me to be here where I am today, and have the abilities of that I have, and have the opportunities that I have, and I'm very much thankful for that. But at the same time, right, I just because I recognize that, and just because I feel bad for the plight of others far away, does not mean that I'm not allowed to care about my neighbors and the situations here in my own world, in my own family, because that should be my priority, right? You can't care about your neighbors unless you take care of yourself, right? It's like being in in a plane when you take a flight anywhere, they give you the safety brief and they tell you that in case of an emergency and the oxygen mask drops, you put on the mask on yourself first, right? And I think we're at a point in our culture where it's time to put on the mask on ourselves before we can start focusing on other people, That's my thought on it.
Hmm. Yeah. Uh, a lot, a lot to comment upon. Um, hmm. With what Brian said in chat, the eternal enemy, the internal enemy must come first, and the illegals aren't the internal enemy. I think when it comes to current events, um, we're used we're used to commenting and we're used to dealing with current events from a position of safety and from a position of, it's almost entertainment. And it was almost information we could actually trust,
Right.
and in the past 20, 30 years since the rise of the internet and the shattering of cultural consensus, everything is much more difficult now, and everything is much less clear, and everything is very chaotic and panic inducing. And the eternal enemy is not even the illegals, it's not even those companies. It's it's the evil within our own souls. And that relates directly to what you were discussing. We got to put the masks on ourselves. We've got to, you know, we've got to pray. We've got to go to church. We've got to cross ourselves. We've got to look after our families. We've got to look after our communities. We have to look after the people directly in our life. And we have to stop letting the machine suck away our attention, because in a lot of ways that's what it runs on. It runs on our attention, it runs on our money, it runs on everything that we provide to it every moment of every day. And we have to minimize that as much as we possibly can in order to, take care of the talents that God has actually provided for us in our real life. And when it comes to politics and when it comes to all that stuff in the government and this, that, I mean, the government and the politics, I mean, all those things, they're all going to do what they want to do. Uh, One thing I keep thinking, one thing I think maybe helps illustrate the point I'm trying to make here. This whole illegal immigrant thing. I personally don't think it's got anything to do with the immigrants. I don't think it's got anything to do with the companies. It's got to do with getting control of the population ahead of the 2030 census. And real, that's where real congressional power comes from. The seats get reapportioned. You've got the electors get decided. I mean, these things have direct impacts on the numbers and how it's going to look going into the 2032 presidential election. Like that could be Vance's second term, or it could be the end of a Democratic first term. You see what I mean, man? So like, I think
Right.
that's what the real
Absolutely.
game is. And politics is going to be politics. That game's always going to be out there. It's always going to be getting played, and the rulers are going to do what they're going to do. All right, so be it. Whatever. It's part of the world that we live in, right? Any different than emperors, arguing over the throne in Byzantium, right? It's the same shit, right? Same shit, different day. Um, so the way to think about this and the way to understand this, especially for us, it's we have to stay focused on what's actually in front of us, what's actually being, dished out to us, and we've got to just leave this stuff. We've just got to leave this stuff up to, whatever. It's going to be what it is. Um, I hate it. I kind of lost my train of thought there for a second, because I was trying to think of something else. You have the elections, you have the immigration, you have all the games being played one way or the other. Oh, I remember the congressional shutdown, man. So I had this thought today. When I heard that the shutdown actually went through, I posted a newspaper clipping of Mikhail Gorbachev, and I was instantly reminded of when he, you know, abdicated the throne, so to speak. January or December 26th, 1991, gets on the television and goes, "Hey, Soviet Union's not a thing anymore. Good luck, everybody. Signing off." And the headline said, Mikhail Gorbachev resigns as president of a country that no longer exists. And what we're witnessing, Alex, you have to realize the big picture, man. And everybody, we all have to realize the big picture. Our country's $37 trillion in debt, guys. Congress is shut down. You could theoretically looking at the de facto shutdown of Congress. What if they never open back up? I mean, the government's not going to stop working. The government's not going to stop functioning to a certain extent. It's only the part of it that doesn't matter shuts down to a certain extent. So like,
Right. Right.
I mean, the government's probably going to reopen. They're probably going to figure it out, whatever. But there will come a time, I think, where it will shut down for the last time, and we gotta grapple with that, especially with 2030 coming up, 2032, 2034, 2036, 2040, the next census, and what's that debt going to be doing the entire time? It's not fucking coming down. Give me a goddamn break. We're going to be looking at 50 trillion in debt by the end of the decade, or whatever the fuck. I don't even know. Like, these are the things that are coming down the pipe, guys. Like, you want to look at what we're going to be, you want to look at what you really need to be worrying about, man, or anybody listening to this. You got to look at what happened to the fucking Soviet Union after it fell apart. That's what we're looking at. And I don't know exactly what it's going to look like. And I don't know if we're going to get it as bad as Russia does. But man, NATO's lining up like the Warsaw Pact nations did. That revolt? That revolt in England that we're seeing, and like the nationalist revolts? Dude,
Right.
solidarity in Poland, baby. That's what that is. That's what we're witnessing. It's just we're waiting for the dock worker strike. And it's gonna be a lightning bolt through the Western liberal system. Now, again, I think United States, is uniquely overpowered when it comes to geography and resources, and just thank God for the fucking oceans, man. I mean, as many immigrants as we have in this country, and as many immigrants as there are in this part of the world, at least it seems to me the vast majority of them are from North America. Seriously,
Right.
thank fucking God for that. Really. Because at least like there's some commonality, and there's some kind of, links that we can make between each other. Right.
Right.
But at the end of the day, what I'm trying to say, guys, is there are enormous historical forces coming down the pipe, and just ride the fucking wave, baby.
Right.
Strap in, because it's gonna be freaking something. I don't want to say cool, because I know a lot of people are going to suffer. I know I'm going to suffer. I know you're going to suffer. I mean, I know all of us are going to suffer if this goes the way I suspect it will probably go. But at the same time, like, holy shit, is it going to be something to watch?
Right. Well, it's interesting because
Well, sorry, just last thing I want to say is we gotta
yeah,
be thinking like this. We gotta be thinking big picture like this.
right. I mean, you're absolutely correct. And it's interesting because, we talk about government shutdown stuff. This is so far, it's been like 4 or 5 days now officially that
Yeah,
it's
that's
been
4 or
shut
5
down,
days. Yeah, that's
which
fine.
is not
Yeah.
the longest one. I believe
No.
off the top of my head, I think the longest government shut down recently has been 30 something days, like a month. And that was like in 2000. Do you remember that whole border wall nonsense that was going
Yeah.
on?
Well,
Right.
yeah. There have been shutdowns for weeks and weeks and weeks in my lifetime.
Right. And there was
Things went
a
fine.
big
It was
one.
okay. It was fine. It was no
There
big
was a
deal.
big one
Yeah.
during Obama's era. And how quaint
Yeah.
does Obama era America feel like
Oh,
now?
Jesus
Right.
Christ.
It's such a different world,
Yeah.
and it's so interesting. The whole, in the fullness of disclosure, right? Barack Obama is the first US president I ever voted for.
Yeah.
Dun dun
Dun
dun.
dun
I voted for
dun.
Obama, right? And in a way, Obama was a very big disappointment for me
Oh
in
yeah.
my early young liberal days. Um,
Yeah.
and I mean, I can talk about that forever and ever if everybody's ever interested in where. And I think in a way he was the herald of what's going on today, and a lot of
Yeah.
he was kind of the end of the left. He was the
Well, he wanted to be like, he wanted to end up like Washington. He wanted to end up like Lincoln. He wanted to end up like FDR. He wanted to be a Caesar-like figure that brought in a new founding for the United States. I mean, I'll go to bat with anybody who wouldn't agree that Biden's term was just a de facto third term for Obama. I mean, he can't run again because of the 22nd Amendment, but come on, the way those guys were talking, who the fuck was pulling the strings? Give me a break.
yeah. It
It
was
was Obama's
it
third
was
term. It was
ultimately
Obama's third term,
yeah.
100%.
It was ultimately his machine, right?
Yeah,
And
exactly. That's what I mean. Yeah, the machine, the
it was
oligarchy,
his machine that he
yeah,
created. I think the big disappointment, and I think there's a lot of uh, new like there's a lot of new conservatives or new people on the right, and I don't think I'm that unique. I think that there's probably a lot of guys on the right that were like a Obama people, right? I
Yeah.
know there's probably been a few. I'm probably not unique, right? And in a way, I'm not big into voting at all nowadays, right? I don't, not a fan of in the Ernest Younger way. I don't really want to put my name down supporting anybody, but there was a hope in a way in Obama, right? And there was a hope where, I mean, look, like there's some things that we need to like kind of address to not let history change when it comes to Barack Obama. First of all, if you followed politics back in the day, right? And this is when I was very young. I mean, I wasn't very young. I was in my 20s, right? But young to the world. He came out, and his big main thing that brought him into national prominence was I believe he gave the speech the after the what was it what was the annual speech called that the president does?
Wasn't
State
it
of
the
the Union
DNC? It was some
address.
big, I think it was a DNC convention. He was like the keynote speaker at some convention.
Right. I thought that they picked him to be the junior senator that gave the dissenting speech after the State of the Union or something
That's
like
what it
that.
was.
Right. That's what he
Yeah,
did, right?
I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
And
Yeah, you're right.
he came out pretty fiery against the Bush era conservative Iraq war,
Right.
Afghanistan
Well, yeah,
war, and that kind of stuff.
Bush was such a clusterfuck, especially with the wars and like all this shit, and the neocons. Good lord,
Right.
pretty much anybody who wasn't a fucking neocon, we were gonna be happy to hear what they had to say because
Right,
it was just
exactly. So then here you have a young guy, and he's young. I don't know. He's probably like my age now, but back when he gave that speech, and he gives
yeah,
a pretty outstanding speech, and he slams the whole expeditionary warfare type thing that the neocons were doing, and the involvement around the world and that kind of stuff. And he talks about focus on the local. He hits all the things that I'm interested in, right? And I remember my friend Richard. He's all like, dude, like you should check out. Did you see that guy's speech? Like he's going to become the president. This was like 3 years before he even started running for president. And I was like,
right,
oh no. And I remember I watched it and I was like, yeah, I think you're right, man. I think this dude is going to run for president eventually. And he's going to, and he ran much sooner than everybody expected. And then he was black. Right. And that was a big deal. All right. And it was a big deal because let's break some illusions here, right? That need to be addressed on this topic, right? He was he did not win the presidency because black people voted for him. That's just statistically impossible, right? If every single if every single black
if they
person
even knew where to go to vote, just
right,
kidding, guys.
if every single African American person that can vote in this country voted for Barack Obama,
Yeah,
he
no,
still couldn't have won, right? He won because white people voted for him, right? Like it's just like you cannot elect the president without white people. It's just how it works. It's called, majorities, right?
it's called
And even
populations.
it's called percentages,
It's called
right?
demographics. It's called
It's
demographics,
just how
guys.
it works, guys, right? So the
Yeah,
fact that he swept and won so thoroughly means that a significant amount of white people voted for him,
yeah,
right? And I'm pretty sure that a lot of conservative people also voted for him because he won
yeah.
very thoroughly, right? And shut up, Mike. And ultimately, I'm way too much of an extremist for those guys. Ultimately, right? Like, what you had is you had those, you had a bunch of people on. And look, there was an element of like, we wanted to become a post-racial America, right? This is just the truth, right? In a way, we wanted to be like, listen, guys, all these white people voted for the black guy, and he's black, and we obviously like him. So can we just go away from that whole thing? Can we just stop like making everything about race and constantly like falling into these like race nonsense things, because everybody was tired of it at that time, right? I don't know if you
Yeah.
remember, like
No,
it
I
really
remember.
felt
I think a big part of his appeal was you've got the 1990s and then that curveball thrown by 9/11 and Bush for all of his failings. At the end of the day, that guy woke up you know, to 9/11 one day, just like the rest of us
Right.
did, you know, and that video of him telling that story to those kids, and then when he, you know, when that guy walks up and whispers in his ear, we make a lot of fun. You know, people made a lot of fun of Bush at the time, but looking back, it's like, yeah, no, I don't think anybody could have handled that all that well. You know,
Right.
so you know, it is what it is. And Obama, like Brian just said, he wasn't Hillary. Obama was Bush, only with a better teleprompter. Obama represented an opportunity to get back on track, to get back into that 90s vibe, right? You
Right.
had the '08 financial crisis, all this. Hey, you know what? No, 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 no. We can get it back on track, guys. We can get the we can still get our Star Trek gay space communism. All right. We
Right.
just got to get this. We just got to get this one last hope. And it turns out it was all fucking horseshit.
Right. And he was
The whole
so
time. The whole time it was fucking bullshit. The whole fucking time.
I
100%.
mean, in a way, he was almost like the perfect avatar of post war, like
Yeah.
end of history America. Here's
The
this guy.
final, the final triumph of manufacturing consent was a snow job.
Right. Well,
That's
yeah.
really what it was.
I mean, how perfect was he? You know, he
Yeah.
was this
Yeah.
he's this very intelligent, very charismatic, very likable guy who happens to be half black, but the immigrant black, right?
Yeah.
And he's
He's
half
from
white.
Hawaii. Hawaii's great, right? Doesn't
Right,
even
he's
think
from
about Hawaii.
Hawaii. He's
Yeah,
intelligent.
Hawaii's
But he also
cool.
like was part of like that Chicago like political
Yeah,
engine thing.
Chicago. Hey, you
You
know,
know,
it's all
so
right. He's
he
a little
touches
dirty,
all
but
the
he'll just get it
bases.
done. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
He's a college liberal who's extremely
Triumph of
intelligent,
the lack of will. That's
but he's
funny.
also
Sorry,
black
I
and he
was
can
being
like
chat.
hang with the
Yeah.
homies or whatever, you know. But
Yeah. Right.
there's a funny story. But when Brian just mentioned that he was not Hillary, it's actually a funny story. When during the early primaries back then, I forgot what year it was, 2007 or 2006, right when the primary started, right? I took a college class. It was like a philosophy class actually, and I had a black professor. And this dude was cool. He was like one of those like nerdy, crazy young black dudes with like the fros and like the glasses. He was very much like a ton of hissy coats or whatever. You know what I'm talking about? He was like that guy,
Yeah.
right? But interestingly enough, he was a Republican. He was a conservative, a hardcore conservative, right? And him and I got into this argument, right? And he it wasn't like a real argument. It was like an intellectual argument, right? And he said that, you know, Barack Obama has no chance. He is never going to beat Hillary. That was like his thing. He was never going to beat Hillary. And I said, no, dude, you're so wrong. He's gonna smoke her. He's gonna sweep her, right?
Yeah.
And I know I laid out my arguments why he's gonna sweep her, and I was right, you know. But this is like early in the election, and he made a bet with me. He bet me $100 that he's like they're never gonna pick a black guy as the blah blah blah, and
Yeah.
he's never gonna win an election. And honestly, like many years later, I already dropped out of college and joined the Navy and stuff, and I deployed to Afghanistan and everything. I came back and I was at a bar called the Red Room. Like, and this is maybe this is 2011, maybe 2010. No, it was like right before I met my wife. So around 2010. And I'm sitting in this bar and Barack Obama's president. He's been president for 2 years already. He already surged in Afghanistan. So much for that,
Yeah.
like stopping foreign expeditionary wars, right?
You're right.
But I ran into my professor and I was like, I didn't say anything. I was like, hey, what's up, dude? And blah, blah, blah. Right. And that dude gave me $100 cash there in the bar.
Fantastic. Hey, good for him. Good for him, man.
I was
That's
like,
great.
I told you, man. And you know what? Like I've always said, Hillary will never be president. There's something just like unlikable about that woman indefinitely.
Look,
she is the most unlikable human being on this planet for some reason,
well, yeah.
right?
Well, yeah. No, the reason in my mind is simple. It's because Bill was getting blowies under the freaking Oval Office desk, and she stood by him. If she had gone full on Jerry Springer and just divorced him, America would have loved that shit. We would have
I
been
don't
like,
know.
hell yeah, girl, fuck that guy. Yeah, freaking
Maybe there was just
hanging
something
out with
so
that flute. Yeah, yeah. Well, it's because she everybody could tell that she stayed with him because she thought it was the best political plan.
right, right.
And
There's
it's just
something
like,
so
really, girl, you got
sinister
no,
about her.
yeah, she's got no self-respect. She's got no
Right.
self-respect. She's never had any self-respect. She'll
Yeah.
do whatever she thinks she's got to do, up to and including, you know, feeding Bill floozies in the White House.
Yeah.
It's just like, come on, really, girl? You got no
Yeah.
self-respect?
He was her beard or whatever.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
I don't know. There's always been something unlikable and sinister about that woman, and
Yeah.
it's just I just don't see her palatable. I don't think a lot of liberals like her. You know,
Yeah.
she's very
Your own
different.
husband didn't like her.
Right.
That's what it
She's
is.
she's very different than, for example, Kamala Harris, who is not sinister. She's not like Kamala
She's
Harris was
retarded.
not
She's
sinister.
retarded.
She just like looked completely out of place. Kamala Harris's vibe was that she was a striver that went beyond her striving capabilities, if that makes sense, right? Like
Yeah.
she was one of those
Yeah.
people, like the people you work at with that are like excellent middle managers that are really motivated and achieving, but they just hit that wall where like they've been promoted past their expertise. And a lot
Yeah.
of times she just looked out of place, you know? And I'm not, like I said, I'm not, this is a nonpartisan viewpoint. This is a macro political opinion where I think, you know, I'll call it how it lays, right? Like if I see, like, you know, I for one, for example, like had a feeling. I called the election, the last election, right? The one where Joseph Biden won. I called it 100%, right? But ultimately, like I've always like enjoyed, like from a strictly apolitical viewpoint, I've always enjoyed like kind of guessing or making a logical, educated guess on who's going to win an election based, and I think a lot of it, and this is the problem with democracy, right? This is a problem with our democracy or any democracy in general, because we're such a large country. We're basically a massive empire, right? Ideally, the way the system's set up is we're supposed to have to be like educated voters who are voting on the topics and that kind of stuff. But your average person cannot keep up with all these topics and all these
Your average person
nuances
is a
of
pleb.
leadership and that kind of stuff.
Total pleb.
Yeah, Curtis Yarvin is correct that, you know, the power doesn't lie in the presidents or the executives, right? It lies in the machines that they built around them, right? And you saw that clearly illustrated in Trump's first, you know, term, where he managed to take over, but he was incapable of dislodging the machine from the
Yeah,
previous.
he had no machine of his own.
Right. Because ultimately the machine beneath him was decades of neoliberal machine, right? It was, you know, Clinton and the Bush machines were almost identical. It was the same people, you know, and if you've ever interacted with like State Department people, they all tend to be members of the machine. They're like the Borg in a way. They're fully committed to their ideologies, and those are the people that run the show, right? So when it comes to voting for president or, you know, these kind of positions, it's really a WWF kind of situation where you're like, you know, you're cheering for the guy or the heel, you know, or you're cheering for the face, right? It's K-fob, right? I don't know if I pronounced it right, K-fob, right? So a lot of it is like,
or however you say it, yeah.
You can predict who wins an election really by vibes, right? Is really who has the best vibes, right? And like who has the best vibes, and like you're not going to compete with when you know you put a dude that's like a slick, suave, and intellectual like Barack Obama against, you know, Mitt Romney. Come on, guys, right? You know, like you know you've got this guy that's a cosmopolitan intellectual versus like a Mormon kind of car salesman dude. You know, they're just
kind
not
of a stiff,
even
cardboard Mormon. Yeah,
right.
Well, it's TV. It's the celebrity presidency.
Right.
We're having the same debate they had back when JFK, you know, ran for office against Richard Nixon. But instead of, you know, wondering, oh, they're not going to vote for him because he's black. Oh, they're not going to vote for him because he's Catholic. Well, he's pretty Catholic, so fuck you. You know, like we're having the same debate.
I mean, it'd be interesting. I mean, this makes no sense because it's so like different now. But like, you know, would Donald Trump would have never been able to win an election against Barack Obama, not in a million fucking years, back in 2008, right?
Yeah, no, in 2008, absolutely not. Absolutely
Because
not.
you needed Barack Obama to be able to have a Trump. It's just how things go. Because like
Yeah,
I said, I think a lot of people became disillusioned around the era
yeah,
of Barack Obama, because a
yeah,
lot of
100%.
that's when a lot of the ideas and ideals kind of died, that a lot of like very moderate liberal people tended to hold. And you had the those riots, those things in Seattle.
Yeah,
I think that was a
WTO.
big
Yep,
key point.
yep.
You had a lot of, and that kind of alienated a lot of the radical left from the neoliberal kind of establishment. You had a lot of, and it's interesting, a lot of those guys from that era became right wingers eventually
Yeah.
through like a
Well,
weird libertarian kind of branch, right? I
yeah.
mean, I empathize with them. I empathize with them very much so. And then you had the Tea Party, which was kind of a weirdo type of thing, Um, interesting enough, that was kind of the last gasp of like Reaganism in a way. So it's actually very interesting when you look at like the historical political things. I mean, I'm sure somebody's done it, but like I would love to read like a massive book that details all the reaction. You know what I actually want to read that I've always wanted, like I've always been curious. I wanted to read like an insider, like a history or an insider, like a expose of Hillary Clinton's like campaign against Trump, like in 2016.
Oh,
That would be like fascinating to read, because there's so many weird choices that they've made that like I just don't
Schadenfreude, the
understand.
political campaign.
Yeah, it was there was so much stuff. Now like you look at Kamala Harris's recent campaign, right? And it is
Yeah,
absolutely like obvious why she lost, right? Like it's like it was theater kid politics, right? It was
yeah.
completely like the people that were running that campaign were so above their head. They would just make like they would just make media choices, or like the whole podcast thing she did, and they would just do things that are like, what, who thought that was a good idea, like
Yeah.
who thought that it was like, you know like, because in a way Kamala Harris had some interesting vibes to her, right? Like she was like a not a ugly looking person. She wasn't like she was like, like if you're ugly, you're not winning as president. I'm sorry, guys,
No,
right? Like you have to
no,
look
you won't.
interesting, all right? Like if you're an ugly dude or an ugly woman, it just in the era of media, you're not winning, right? Like if you're
Yeah,
like
who was
some
that
sort of,
fat dude from New Jersey?
yeah,
That fat
what
fuck
was
from
his
New
name?
Jersey. I mean,
Yeah,
y'all
that
know who
guy.
I'm talking about.
Yeah, that guy's
Yeah,
not
nah,
gonna
nah,
win
bro, it
anything,
was never gonna happen. It was never gonna happen, bro.
right?
It's never gonna happen.
But
Just go home.
yeah,
Just go home.
like Kamala
You
Harris's
know,
campaign was so out of touch, like upper class, like Chris Christie. Brian called it Chris Christie. That was the fat guy from New Jersey. Um, yeah, I mean, you're ultimately right, Tia. Tia said, until
yeah, right.
Americans realize that their vote for POTUS does not count, they are not on the electoral college, and ergo, their vote is a metric of how much bullshit they want to take off the selected installed POTUS. Ultimately, Younger in the Forest Passage absolutely explained that, and this is an idea that was better elaborated on in in Curtis Yarvin's work, right? Where the thing is, though, it's like the problem with democracy, and this is where the evil of democracy comes in, is that it is a consensus, right? There is a lack of responsibility in leadership. So when you have a leader that wins by a democratic fiat, but like for example by elections, right, and they make poor decisions and they delegate those decisions to their apparatus, which is this who's ruling you. When you're voting for president, you're not voting for somebody that's going to be in charge of you. You're voting for the representative of an apparatus, a machine, a political machine, right? And successful presidents have very tight control of their political machine, while poor presidents have very bad control of their political machine. In the case of Trump 2016, his first thing, he had a very, very poor control of the political machine, right? Almost no control. That's where everything he did was undermined or brought down by the established machine, right? So ultimately, we are basically giving a pass by through voting, right? Because if you have a traditional monarchy or a dictatorship or any kind of authoritarian like strongman, whether it's like a tribal leader or like an African warlord or whatever in charge, right? That this guy's in charge or this girl or whatever, right? And that their political appointees, whether it's like their dukes or barons or their colonels and their militia that they took over, right? That's the ones that they chose. So every poor decision made by them leads to, you can blame it directly on them, right? You can say that, Spain's economy was crappy because Francisco Franco made poor choices. So whose fault is that Spain economy is faulty? Well, Francisco Franco's for listening to his advisors, right? Yeah. But in a representative democracy like ours, when our economy tanks because of whatever, corporate machine decisions are made, well, guess who's responsible? We are, because we gave that vote 1 of a billion or whatever, right? But at the same time, it diffuses the responsibility. In a way, it's an insurance for bad decisions, right? So when things suck, right, you don't blame the president, right? Nobody's like, oh, it's Barack Obama's fault that this, blah, 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 or it's Trump. I mean, okay, morons do, right? But fundamentally, the only people to be blamed in this situation, right, is us, right? Because, well, we voted. We are part of that system. We are technically equally responsible for the decisions of our government. Then, and that's in a way the problem with democracy, because in a small village, right, when 20 dudes or 20 humans in a village vote for, should we plant the crops in August or should we plant the crops in August or should we plant them in September or whatever, right? And then a winter storm comes and destroys the crops. Well, guess what? Who's responsible for making that decision? The people that voted, right? But because we've diffused it's such a large scale, right? We're all in a way responsible, or that blame can be put. And you're right. Tia's right. Like, we are not responsible for the corporatists. Yes, on paper and in truth, we are not responsible, right? But being part of the system allows the people that do have those powers to put the blame somewhere else. Nobody took the blame for the financial crisis, the housing crisis during Barack Obama's term, right? Because you're like, well, you guys all voted for this shit, like, it's not my fault. It's not their fault. It's, blah, 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 right? So, right. And, the whole legal person status of corporation is absolutely absurd and insane, right? And, everybody knows and is shocked. People that think that I'm some kind of a Republican conservative, shocked that I am very much anti-globalism and anti-corporations, right? I agree with all those opinions, right? That, I think corporations should be held to the standards of whatever country they're based in. They should be benefiting in that country, right? So I agree with all kinds of stuff like tariffs and actually significant tax burdens upon corporations, right? I mean, you look at, if you spend any time in, for example, Japan, right? One thing that if you go to Japan, you'll be shocked, right? I mean, as an American, you'll be shocked that you will never see American cars, right? Every single car is made in Japan. Every single piece of machinery or equipment is either a Honda or a Toyota or a Mitsubishi or a Kawasaki, right? That's because the corporations in Japan are first and foremost Japanese, right? Even massive global corporations like Toyota, who have bases in America and are technically an American company by default, at least, how they make their Tacomas and stuff, they are run by Japanese people in Japan, right? And yeah, it is I'm absolutely an anti-corporationist and anti this nebulous system of a corporation that doesn't belong to a country, right? And I put the blame on Reagan era. Well, Reagan started that, but mostly Bush era republicanism, and I believe and Suzuki, right? And I believe that the whole correct me if I'm wrong, but the corporation as people thing, that was a Bush era thing, or was that an Obama era thing?
I think
Do
it
you
was,
remember?
isn't that Citizens United?
Citizens United, yeah.
That was 2012, whatever that. Yeah, hold on. I was actually just looking at that in class. I'm going to be
Oh, it was
talking
Obama.
about that.
Right. It was Obama. Okay. So yeah, if it's 2012, it was Obama, right? So yeah, Citizens United, an
Yeah, it was
absolutely
2010. 2010. So
atrocious,
yeah,
like dystopian concept when you think
yeah.
about it, right? And it's like it's absolutely grotesque and insane when you really think about it. So yeah, I think that there's a lot of things where you can say that like that, and like I said, that's why I'm not a conservative, because one, there's nothing to conserve really, right?
No,
um and I guess I'm on the right because I'm on the right because I'm against the idea of this globalism kind of world, because the one thing I hated the most about traveling around the world is that everything is becoming a corporate monstrosity. If you close your eyes in downtown Tokyo, in like Shibuya, right, and Shibuya station right outside, and you look at all the billboards, and you were to ignore the kanji and the crazy like anime stuff, and you look and you see you open your eyes and you'll see Gap and Louis Vuitton, and you'll see Apple, and you'll see Microsoft, and you'll see all those same exact things in Starbucks. And then you close your eyes and you go to Times Square, you're going to see the same exact stuff. It's become a machine, right, that we cannot resist. We do not. I don't want to live in Night City. As much as I like Cyberpunk 2077, I do not want to live in Night City. All right, and I don't want to live in a world where corporations are running the place, right? And that to me is a nightmare, right? I want to live in a localized world, a small world, and in a way that's what the real issue is. The real issue is we are discussing a problem of people versus these nameless machines, right? And that's
people
that's what
versus
it
the
is,
machine.
right? And
Well, I'm gonna make a crazy prediction here. Not a crazy prediction, but I'd like to make a prediction based on what you've been saying here. This is what keeps running through my mind as you've been speaking. Um, we don't want to live in that world, but I'm not entirely convinced we have a choice. And a lot of that has to do with, once again, consequences and decisions that were made centuries ago, and a lot of decisions that were made, you know, during and after World War II. And the future is it the one who is going to be able to seize power. And if I may torture the historical analogy, the the person that's going to forge the American Republic into the American Empire, like the Roman Republic into the Roman Empire, it's going to have to be the guy that picks or gets the backing of the right corporations, who's going to have the backing of the correct corporations that then grease and fuel the political machine. And then it's going to be somebody who is then able to take that, but then also master the Colosseum, also master, the howling mob of the plebs. And that's going to be anybody who can meme like a freaking maniac on the internet.
right,
And that's going to be what we're looking at, I think, in the next few different political cycles. It's going to be all this stuff we've been talking about, and it's going to be able to see, and it's going to be the person who's able to see through the maelstrom, who's able to see through the combination of all this stuff.
oh man, I think Tia in the chat nailed it. She says, "Oh, so AI." I mean, in a way, that's
Well,
terrifying, right? Because
I don't think it's necessarily going to be AI, because at the end of the day, I mean, an AI is going to want to. Well, the thing is, I would even have to be convinced it's an artificial intelligence to begin with, because at least the stuff that we see most of the time is large language models and things that are, properly weapons grade shit. I don't know. I think it's a lot more likely it's going to be JD Vance before an AI. I'll say that.
well,
And even
you
that
know,
sort of, it's going to require a lot of luck. It's going to require a lot of it's going to require a lot of just things to go correct. I keep thinking of, when basically all those Vance memes kind of took over the freaking internet, and he laughed at it. He even posted his own version of those memes. I mean, I saw, like, when I see that shit, I'm going, oh, son of a bitch, there it is. It's that guy, smart enough to do that. Because we find it uncouth that Homeland Security and these other groups are, memeing a little bit, and they're making, but at the same time, that's how you talk to the mob. That's how you talk to the mob in 21st century America. If you try to talk to it the old way, you're going to get thrown out like Clinton did. That's why Clinton lost. That's why Harris lost. That's why Biden wasn't taken seriously.
Right. She was in an old mode. She never got the advance. But here's an interesting issue, right? So when you look at Marxism, right, and you look at Marx and the 19th century kind of proto hyper capitalism of that era, right? You had the industrialists. You can look at America in the 19th century, and I mean, Jason McGinty, who does history specifically of the 19th century, would be able to like really elaborate on this. But you had your railroad barons and your robber barons, and you had the oil boom guys back in that day, right? And the Carnegie guys, or whatever you say his name, and the Rockefellers and those guys, right? And then eventually the Fords and those dudes and these big kind of corporations, these big business guys, right? And all these guys, ultimately, one thing you see with 19th century and the most of the 20th century is that these guys created something. There was a product made, right? There was excessive, like, the Marxist, right? They're not wrong about the exploitation of the worker, right? Like, they were wrong about their prescription for it, but they were not right about the descriptive element of Marxism, right? Like, Marx and Engels were absolutely correct. And you can actually read Das Kapital and a lot of other, communist works. And you can read a lot of the, even the stuff like Lenin wrote. And there's absolutely, I don't take much offense to a lot of their stuff, right? I think that they're actually correct in their description of the exploitation of the worker and the exploitation of capital. What they were wrong, of course, is in the prescription of it, right? Like how to resolve it. But and if you look at those guys, right, one of the things you can say about the late 19th and early 20th and even mid 20th century corporate kind of entities is that they ultimately created product, right? There was still a material element to it. In the early days, it was steel and oil and that type of stuff. And later it became actual products. You had your massive, food conglomerates and that kind of stuff, right? But more and more and more, the corporations that are in control of today aren't actually creating anything, right? The richest people do not make anything, right? They are actually just traders of imaginary financial digital bits on the internet, right?
Well, it's information. It's information that they deal.
Right.
It's information that they trade in. And then that information gets sold to people that want it for whatever purpose, usually to sell us bullshit. So
right. So it's interesting because like we're in a world where the corporations don't actually need workers anymore, right?
No.
There's no need for workers. There's no need for they just need people to buy. And we're getting to the point where even that is starting to become obsolete, right? Where consumers aren't even needed, right? So you have a very interesting thing, and that is the difficulty part is like at this point is like what are you creating? What are you making? What is the product at this point, right? Like ultimately, you look at corporations, right? And I mean, that is the truth, right? No need for workers, it equals neo-feudalism or neo-slavery, right? And ultimately, right, a lot of people have these really weird and mistaken ideas about technology. For example, they believe that like, all of a sudden a lot of technology was discovered and invented in the 19th century. And, it made the work of the life of workers easier. But if you look at a lot of the technological ideas of, for example, like the Greeks, right? The Greeks actually were able to invent, the Greeks came up with something like a steam engine, right? Back in the day. And a lot of steam technology could have easily been invented in antiquity if you really wanted to be honest, right? I mean, it's not that complex of an idea. Maybe they lack the machining capabilities, but eventually the Greeks could have figured out machining and steam engines and that kind of stuff, right? But the Greeks did not want to do that, right? Because they didn't need to, because they had slaves. There was no need to do anything, because their their drive was not profit, right? It was not profit or comfort. It was just they looked at the world as this is the way it is. Well, we are in a way, like, sadly, kind of returning to that world, right? Where, what do you do in the Star Trek Federation world, right? Um, and it's a very interesting kind of topic, right? Where, like, right, you guys agree?
I'm trolling one of our people. I apologize.
Yeah, I mean, we love Tia, and
I mean, I guess I don't entirely understand what the point of saying, well, that's systemic. Okay, well, historical issues are never resolved. They merge and shift into new ones. I think that's a pretty fair thing to say.
right,
And it's
right,
like, slavery, like having a problem with slavery is you're having a problem with slavery as it is defined in the American high school public classroom, which
right,
is not slavery at all. I mean, look, if you don't own property, you're probably a fucking slave. All right. Like, and it's 21st century, like you said, 21st century neo-feudalism. So look, slavery, it's not a question of slavery being good or bad. Slavery is a natural part of the human experience, whether you like it or not.
right. I
Like
mean, I'm
somebody's got to work.
I'm gonna agree. I'm
Yeah.
gonna agree with you, Vista, because ultimately,
Yeah.
right? I will say, I will
Yes.
say, right?
Yeah. Somebody's got to be the dick and somebody's got to be the ass.
Well,
Sorry. That's how human history works.
I'm going to agree with you 100% on that. I'm actually going to
Yeah.
disagree with slavery breeds revolt, because historically speaking,
Not necessarily. No.
there's been slavery
No.
through, the entirety of history, and
Yeah.
there wasn't a revolt of slaves. There was very few revolts in ancient times of slaves. There was very few, right? Slavery in modern era might eventually build revolt, but like I said, nobody came out and nobody chimped out when we lived under medical slavery for 3 years during COVID, right? And like, ultimately, though, the problem is we can't have this proper discussion about slavery, because you're going to always get into the American context, right?
Yeah.
And it's
pointless.
difficult. And
Yeah. Yeah. There's
ultimately, like,
nothing to discuss.
as who I am as a Christian, I think that all humans are have divine souls, and I think that all humans have equal dignity. And American slavery took away the dignity from people, and that is absolutely a
Well, yeah.
wrong way to do it. And like, the South lost, right? And a huge reason why the South lost is because it was not industrialized.
Right.
The North
Yeah.
had slaves just as much. The North had better
Sure.
slaves than the South, right?
Yeah.
The northern slaves were Irish industrial workers
I was
slaving
just gonna
away for
say, yeah,
for
exactly.
15 hours a
Yeah.
day for a penny.
Yeah.
Because you know what? Like, the people in the North figured out something that was the Northerners were a lot smarter than the Southerners, right? Because the problem with slaves in the South is you have to feed them and keep them alive. When you
Right.
have a
Yeah.
bunch of imported immigrant Irish people from a famine that you pay pennies per day to, like, get their fingers chopped off in factories, and you just give them some shillings or whatever, some pennies to the dollar, right? And then they have to feed themselves and live in their corporate towns and their shanties and stuff. That's a lot cheaper. It's a lot cheaper to have thousands and thousands of immigrant workers that you barely pay than it is to have to feed and clothe and keep slaves, right? In the same way, it's a lot cheaper to own a car than it is to own horses, right?
Yeah.
You,
Right.
you know what I mean, right?
Yeah.
So ultimately, like, the North figured out the slave problem, which is the slaves are expensive and inefficient, and they're not expendable, right? That's the problem with slavery. Whether I'm not talking about race slavery, right? Like, I don't care if they're black,
No, of course
white, or Asian, or whatever, right? It's a lot easier to use some Chinese immigrants on the railroad than it is to use people you own, because people you own, you have to feed, you have to take care of, and they're an investment. But the Chinese labor that you hired, you give him enough money so he can buy his opium and sit in his opium tent in the Wild West, right? And that's
not. Right.
exactly what happened, right? You know what I mean? Right?
Well, what you're seeing is, and I'm speaking as a layman, of course, but with the South, you had the older aristocratic agricultural based slavery where the slaves were part of the social structure, right? And in the North, they had the bright machine idea of turning the slaves into widgets, interchangeable economic units, which then births or is part of the birth of the world that we're living in now, where we're making the transition from interchangeable economic widgets, economic consumers into, I don't fucking know, man. I mean, it's going to be something related to information. Obviously, it's going to be something related to data. I really like. Did you see what Dr. Monzo had to say the other day when he was writing about, Younger had the worker, which was the transition through the 20s,
Right.
and now you've got the phantom, which is basically the digital relics, the digital information we leave out there is what we now create, what we now provide. I may not even be explaining it all that well, but we're getting into a similar situation where a new Union, a new North, is probably going to clobber the South at some point, whatever the South is these days. So, I
Right.
mean, I don't
Right.
know. But anyway,
Well, but ultimately, are we not in a way slaves to the system that we live in? Like, go
yeah,
ahead and don't pay your taxes and see how fast somebody kicks down your door and throws your ass in
well, yeah,
jail. Right? You
well,
know what I
yeah,
mean?
no, yeah. If
Like,
you're dependent, you're dependent, and it is increasingly, there are less and less people every day. There are less and less people every day who are fully independent of the system, who are
right,
able to function without it,
right,
and that is
absolutely.
working as intended, man. So it is what
Yeah.
it is, but we'll
All
find out.
right, so we're gonna leave it on that now, guys. It is almost
Yeah,
7:30. We've gone like half an hour past our time.
yeah. I'm getting a
You know,
hollered at over here, so I should
a,
probably
a little
wrap
bit.
it up.
A little bit of a darker conversation today that
Yeah,
started off with some issues. Next week we're gonna lighten it up a bit. We're gonna talk about the machine and we're gonna talk about the book.
we're gonna lighten it up today. We're gonna talk about how everything you know is death.
All right, we're gonna talk about the machine tomorrow
It's
and
fine.
about how
It'll be
everything
fun.
is wrong and corrupt. I welcome arguments and I welcome the good discussion, and then that's great. I agree with all of you, even though all of you are wrong and I'm right. And I really like the fact that I was able to, especially in the early part of the episode, kind of go through some ideas that have not fully developed about my own personal experience with people and that kind of stuff. And I hope that we all put our differences aside and are able to have good conversation. Guys in the chat, please be nice to each other, right? But ultimately, thank you for
I'm also
joining
one of the
us.
guys that you're yelling at in chat right
Yeah,
now.
can you just knock it off, right? Thank you for joining us, right? Thank you for the
Yeah,
conversation.
guys.
And
Yeah,
if you
thank you.
enjoy the show, please tune in next Tuesday at 5 o'clock. Like, share, and subscribe. I really appreciate all you guys. And if you get the chance, please go ahead and try to read that book we're talking about, or at least read parts of it, because that way I don't have to re-explain everything, even though I'm going to re-explain everything. And for you can send some of those white bucks my way, Tia, because
Yeah,
that's
man.
that's at least 2 months of subscription. I need that. I gotta pay for
Yeah,
this. I gotta
absolutely.
pay for my electricity.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah. Your slaves are gonna be paid subscribers, right? Because then it's fine.
yeah,
Then slavery is good, actually.
I just got a text message from Spectrum Internet saying thank you for how much they charge me, like freaking $200 for this shitty internet that I have. It's like, oh my
Ugh.
god, right? But ultimately, um, I I'm glad all you guys are here. And thank you. It was a great conversation. And we'll see you guys next time. All right. Good night. And
All right.
have a wonderful, wonderful week. And have a great weekend. And try to stay off the internet this weekend. Okay. Good night.
See you guys.